a sovereign citizen, dude. What's happening, guys? I'm a sovereign citizen from Naperville. I know all about the Golden Bridge and how fraudulent it is.
They hit me with a really strong dose of OC spray.
I want to speak to you, dead soldier, now! I know the laws, buddy, and I'm waiting for you to do something wrong so I can sue you to pulpit.
I pay for that uniform, I pay for that car, I'm the taxpayer, right?
Okay, Bull, are we going out?
Yep, we're out. We're going.
Okay, cool. Thanks everybody for showing up. Today's a little bit different than what we normally do. Instead of having a debate or just pointing at laughing at stupid, we're going to talk about a little bit of science. So I pride myself on being the stupidest person in any room that I happen to be in, and today was easy. I'm by far the stupidest person in this room, so mission accomplished on my part. So tonight we're going to be talking about, I've gotten a lot of requests in my comment section to explain, or just people asking me, what is Schrodinger's cat? What does that mean? Where did you come up with that name? So I got a couple of smart guys to come help me explain what that is. So I think first I'm going to give my take on what Schrodinger's cat is and how that came about, and then they can point and laugh and tell me how I'm wrong. So Erwin Schrodinger was an Austrian and later became an Irish physicist, and this was at the dawn. He was one of the pioneers of quantum physics, and he didn't like the whole concept of uncertainty, quantum uncertainty, such as in an atom. And in the classical picture that we all see of an atom, you see the electrons in particular spots in the shells around the nucleus of the atom. Well, that's not really how it exists. It's more of a cloud, and you can't really pinpoint where that electron is until you make a direct observation of it. And then you know exactly where it is. But until then, you can only say where it probably is. And he wasn't very happy with that. And so he made up this thought experiment called Schrodinger's cat, in which he says, if you put a cat in a box and you put a device in there that has a 50% chance of killing the cat, you don't know whether the cat is alive or dead until you open the box, and therefore the cat can be seen as both being alive and dead simultaneously until you observe it. And he meant that quite derisively. He meant it to show the absurdity of the uncertainty principle. And later on, he adopted it from my understanding of the history of this. He adopted it, and he fell in line and accepted that was the case. And my goal tonight is for us to talk about sort of the dawn of quantum mechanics and how Schrodinger and other people, Niels Bohr, Max Planck, how all this came about. And hopefully Jack can talk to us a little bit about the Schrodinger equation, which was Schrodinger's most important contribution. Of course, he's best known for Schrodinger's cat, but his most important contribution was the Schrodinger equation. But before we do that, we have another special guest. Bull, if you have that little video clip that I sent you, tell me when that's ready.
Oh, it's ready.
Okay, so yeah, I reached out to somebody that I know who's a well-known theoretical physicist who's going to give us his take real quick, and then we'll get to Tony and Jack. Whenever you're ready, Bull.
Okay, so here's the thing. I guess you're aware that Leonard asked me out.
Well, he didn't actually say anything, but when he came back to the apartment, he was doing a dance that brought to mind the Happy Hippos in Fantasia.
Oh, that's nice. Anyhow, the thing I wanted to talk to you about is, since Leonard and I have become friends, I was just... Want to sit down?
Oh, I wish it were that simple. You see, I don't spend much time here, and so I've never really chosen a place to sit.
Well, choose.
There are a number of options, and I'm really not familiar
People,
enough
can you
with
fast
the
forward
cushion
about a
densities,
minute? I
airflow
meant to send you the
patterns, and dispersion
redacted
of
clip of this.
sunlight.
Thing.
A little. Well, I suppose so. In the same way Menelaus had a little crush on Helen of Troy.
The point is, Leonard isn't the kind of guy I usually go out with.
Leonard isn't the kind of guy anyone usually goes out with. Would you be open to rotating the couch clockwise 30 degrees?
No. What I'm saying is, Leonard might be different in a...
Right. Let's try this again, YouTube. Let's see if we come back. I get really tired of this. Okay. Alright, chat. Alright. We should be back now.
Okay, yeah, let's just not worry about playing the clip. It was just a little funny thing about Sheldon talking about Schrodinger's cat. So we can skip that. Let's get to our actual real guest. PhD Tony, how are you today, sir?
I'm very well, thank you. Thank you very much for the invitation to have me here. I appreciate it.
Just in case anybody's been living under a rock, tell us who you are, what you do, and why you're here.
So I'm a geophysicist. I study sea level change and the response of Earth's surface to changes in surface loading. And I'm here because I am deeply affronted by science misinformation, such as flat Earth and climate denialism. And I think, the guys in this community are doing a fantastic job stamping it out. And I'm here because you asked me to be here, so thank you.
Well, I appreciate you showing up. Jack, same question to you. Who are you? What do you do, and why are you here?
I'm a mathematical physicist, or a mathematical physics student, I should say, not a physicist yet. And I'm drowning in homework, and this is a good escape, so here I am.
Excellent. Yeah, I was on the plot hole last night, and I was trying to remember, and I said that as best as I could recall, you were a mathematical physics student. Yeah. And so you're a PhD candidate, correct?
No, just in my undergrad still.
Okay, doing your undergrad.
Yeah.
Well, even still, I came pretty close, so I'm pretty happy with myself.
Yeah.
So the two of you, how close did I get with my explanation of my understanding of what Schrodinger's cat is?
Pretty good. Just some finer details, I think, should be elaborated on.
Yeah, I think you also misused the term uncertainty principle, because that's a different thing. But in general, you did a pretty good job of explaining where it came from and how it works. You managed to do it without mentioning Niels Bohr. Not sure that you should have excluded him, because he's kind of an important figure in this story, but we'll get to that.
Yeah, Niels Bohr was definitely one of the giants when it came to the dawn of quantum mechanics. So when I said the uncertainty principle, I was talking about the Heisenberg's uncertainty principle.
Yeah,
and I believe that is more about if you know where, for example, if you know where a particle is, you can know where it is, but you can't know its momentum. And if you know its momentum, then you can't know where it is. Is that right?
More or less.
Yeah. So there's a trade-off in certainty between the velocity or / momentum of the particle and its position. You can't know both of them precisely. The more certain you get of one, the less certain you get of the other, which has some interesting effects in some cases.
Yeah, I was looking at something about that. So if you put more and more waves on top of each other and let them have their constructive and destructive interference, you get more of a probability of of one aspect of it, and therefore you become less certain of the other aspect. So if you're 99% certain of its location, you're only 1% certain of its momentum. Is that sort of right?
Yeah, there's a constant of there's a constant of proportionality. This is where the Planck's constant features in the amount in how certain you can be about both, but it works out something like that. Yeah. But Schrodinger's cat is more about duality. So to take a photon for instance, a photon can have a wave or a particle
Property,
nature, and it doesn't decide until it has to. So by observing the particle, you make it choose. Is kind of what's going on. So it's whizzing around, it's minding its own business, and then somebody looks at it, and it goes, oh, now I have to make a life choice. Do I want to be, am I actually a particle or am I actually a wave? And the choice that it makes depends a little bit on the context that you're doing it, that it is in at the time of the observation. But Schrodinger's cat is all about that observation imposing a choice. Up until that observation occurs, it doesn't have to make a choice. And I'm using the term observation here, which makes it sound like somebody has to look at it. Obviously, quantum mechanics works in the vast majority.
Two spots where the photon goes through either one slit or another, correct?
I think you may be misunderstanding the double slit experiment, but I'll let Jack give his opinion.
Sure. Here, might I just share my screen because it might make this easier with the visuals.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I have no problem with being told that I'm wrong, because then I'm going to learn. Like I said, I'm the dumbest guy in the room here.
All right. So this come through okay?
Yep.
Should be at one note. Okay, so let's let me make a. I'm a very bad artist, so you'll have to forgive my penmanship skills here. But, oh God, that was awful. I'll let the computer draw the rectangle for me. Okay, let's say this is an electron gun. All right. So it's shooting electrons out in this direction. And you have a plate, and I'll just draw the cross section over here with two slits in it. You with me so far?
Yeah. No. This is how I've always seen it.
Yeah. All right. And we have some sort of detector plate on the other side. Now, if we were to say shoot one electron at a time, and we had some sort of detector around here, then what we basically see is it's nothing remarkable. It's like shooting a tennis ball out of a tennis ball launcher. They just sort of go straight, and whatever slit they happen to come out of, it hits the detector on the other side. It gives a very standard distribution pattern. There's nothing that's really interesting there on its own. But let's say we don't have that detector there, and then we repeat the same thing. Well, then as we were to repeat this experiment over and over again, so we get more data points, we'd see that the electrons, they start clustering in certain spots. And if we were to say have a graph, and we have sort of like a distance on this side, so we'll call that x, and distance being in this direction. And then we have the frequency at which it hits, or rather the number of times it hits, then we should get sort of this like this little wave equation or wave pattern here. And what's interesting about that is that it's the exact same pattern that you were to get if you were to do this with a double slit and like actual waves that we can observe. For example, if you do this in your bathtub, and instead of using an electron gun, you had, I don't know, like a big container that you use to make square waves. Square waves approach the slit, they diffract at both slits, they interfere with each other, and that gives us this interference pattern. And that's what happens with the distribution of electrons if we were to do this with the double slit and without any sort of detector there to as we would say in the Copenhagen interpretation, we wouldn't collapse the wave function just yet. Now,
so where the troughs of the waves are, you would get constructive interference, and where the crests are, you would get constructive interference. But where a wave, where a trough and a crest meet, that would be destructive interference.
Right.
And so you'd be less likely to get an electron on the other side.
Now, you can actually get into a little funny debate where you say that when we say we observe the electron, we mean any sort of interaction whatsoever, basically. So this detection, because it's colliding with the electron, it's actually collapsing the wave function, as we would say in one interpretation of quantum mechanics. And that's why we just get a singular dot for that impact. But what's crazy is that even though we're only shooting one electron at a time, and if we were to directly observe it, we'd only have it go through one slit. Remember that when we do this with water waves or any other form of wave, like say sound waves, the reason we get that distribution pattern is because the waves from both slits interfere with each other. But we're only shooting one electron at a time. And when we observe it, it only goes through one or the other. And so what that basically means is, even though we can sort of simplify it as an electron sort of behaves like a wave, what's more peculiar is that it behaves as a wave going through both slits at the same time. And that's sort of where the Schrodinger's cat thing comes in, because it has to do with what we call a superposition of quantum states. So we can say before we observe it, the electron has a state where it goes through the top one. My notation is bad here, so let's just say that is our up state, and that is our down state. That is not a good way of drawing the bracket notation, but whatever. So we say that the electron is in a superposition of these states if we don't observe it. Now, what Schrodinger didn't like was that the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics, which is sort of the predominant one, is that as long as you observe it, you collapse a wave function. But unless you collapse a wave function, you can treat it as if both states are occurring simultaneously. But if we were to reduce this to say, when my screen froze on me, for God's sakes, come on. Come on, work with me here. So if we were to use that analogy of a cat, and I'll do my best cat drawing here. Very realistic, as I'm sure you'll agree.
It looks like a photograph.
Oh, God, I know, right? So we can have this in a superposition of dead and alive. And if this cat was an electron, we could say that it's both at the same time until we do something to observe it. But what Schrodinger is saying here is that if we were to apply this to something else, like say the superposition of a cat, it doesn't make sense to say it's both alive and dead at the same time. So he doesn't like the Copenhagen interpretation of quantum mechanics. But what's important to note here is that when I explained the double slit experiment, I'm just giving you the raw effect that we observe, the distribution pattern, without any sort of interpretation to rationalize that. The Copenhagen interpretation is just one way to make sense of this whole thing, and there's a dozen others that can do the same thing. They're all, as we would say, equally correct in the way that the predictions were able to reflect reality.
Well, the Copenhagen
one is more correct.
The Copenhagen interpretation is the most widely regarded right now. Is that right?
It's the one that you always be teaching to introductory students like myself. But there are others there that can make the exact same predictions, but their interpretation of the effect is a lot different. What's important here is that no matter what interpretation you use, that is the effect that we see, and we just need a model that can quantitatively predict the results that we get. As a professional physicist might say, just shut up and calculate. The interpretation.
So there's also quantum entanglement, where you have one particle will, for example, have a spin up and the other one has a spin down, and you don't know which is which until you observe one, but as soon as you observe one, you know exactly what the other one is doing. So and
that requires a little bit more explanation than that.
Oh, absolutely.
So you start off with two particles that are whose properties are related and they're next to one another. We're getting into stuff where I consider somewhat erosional to a person's personal sanity, right?
Indeed.
I can't think of a sane way to explain the double slit experiment, for instance. There are ways to explain it. None of them, to my mind, are actually sane. They're all quite mind blowing. But from my traditional physics point, you'd be surprised how little quantum entanglement there is in this particular process. But surely the information, while it is true that you have I guess my question is, how are you defining the transport of information in this question? Because obviously the observer near the one particle whose wave function has been collapsed, they know what's going on, but an observer near the other particle still has no idea. The information that has occurred from this event has not been transmitted to that event. The particle knows what's going on, but an observer there doesn't. So how is information being defined for the purposes of this particular experiment?
It's both a very good and very bad question. It's a good question because it does hit the nail on the head. It's a very bad question because it's very abstractly defined, and it's kind of like trying to explain the double slit experiment. There's no explanation that's good to our classical intuition. I mean, the whole point of mechanical interpretations is to sort of be able to see quantum mechanics through the eyes of classical intuition, which is actually a very bad way of going about it, because the whole point is we should just drop classical intuition when we look at quantum mechanics.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but I guess to sort of answer your question here, we're not really transferring information. And when I say information, I don't mean in the abstract sense.
It's being so persnickety. All right. Come on, YouTube. Let's keep this going. All right, go ahead. You're on.
All right, cool. So if we were to use that analogy of Schrodinger's cat, just to keep it consistent, let's say we have, because the idea is that you're in a box, or you have a cat that's inside a box, and let me just draw this very good cat, and it's also got some sort of poison capsule, and I'll just replace that with a bomb within the box. That is an awful bomb. Yeah, that looks like a cartoon bomb. So let's say we want to state the quantum states of this system. So what we would have is the cat is in a superposition of alive and dead. So that's alive, and we have dead. And one thing. And when we combine the quantum states of different objects, we consider the quantum states to be multiplicative. So what we can do is we can multiply that by the bomb has exploded or has not exploded, plus the bomb has exploded. How do I want to draw that? Oh, God. I am not an arts major. Now, if we were to do this with just simple first world algebra, then we might try and distribute this, but we get a problem. We cannot have, say, the cat is alive. Combined with the bomb has exploded. Oh my God, I am so bad at drawing.
You're doing a great job.
Better than I could have done. looks good.
So we cannot have the cat being alive and the bomb exploded. That contradicts. And so we need for there to be a way to define the relationship between these states. And so we say that the cat is entangled with the bomb because their states are dependent on each other. So if the cat is alive, then the bomb has to be unexploded. And if the cat is dead, then the bomb has to be exploded. Oh my God. So that's what we mean by the states are entangled. Now, the way we would usually do this, let's say with the I don't want to bring up Bell's inequality just yet, but the way that electrons interact with each other is they have what's called a spin, and it's not that the electron is spinning, it's just that physicists are bad at naming things. So it's analogous to the magnetic field of a spinning ball, but electrons don't actually spin, but that's a story for another time. So let's say
they just call it spin.
Yeah. So
Spin
if we
up or
have two
spin down,
electrons,
for example.
I'm going to commit a cardinal sin here. We're going to have the orbital model of an electron, just for illustrative purposes. So we have an electron here and an electron here. Now, they occupy the same orbit, but they're going to have different spins. And that's a property of what's called the Pauli exclusion principle. So electron 1, it has to have a state of, if it's down, then that implies the electron 2 has a state of spin up. They cannot have the same spin as long as they're in the same orbital. And what we would do with to test the entanglement is we basically shoot them off in different directions, and then when we measure one, let's say we measure the spin of electron 1 to be spin up, we can now infer that the spin of electron 2 is spin down because it has to be. And we can verify this by measuring the electron later, although it's not going to be a perfect experiment because the act of measuring the spin of one electron will change its state. But let's just keep it nice and simple for now. If we know one electron to be spin up, then we know that the other electron to be spin down.
Regardless of how far apart they are.
Right. But that's different from transferring information because we're not sending some sort of particle to hit the second electron to measure it. We're just inferring what its state has to be from that first electron.
Right. So I know that some people in technology have tried to get cute with it and say, well, this could be a way that we could transfer information at faster than the speed of light, but it doesn't really work because you're not sending information.
Right.
It's just that you know what the other one is.
Yeah, we can't encode information into a quantum state and have that be transferable.
Right, regardless of the fact that people have postulated that maybe in some way you could in the future be able to, but right now we can't do that. We don't have any way of doing that.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, and for everybody in the chat that may be, if you didn't hear me earlier and you're thinking that this stuff's super hard, as I said earlier, we were buffering, so I don't know if it actually went out to the chat, but Dr. Richard Feynman, probably one of the greatest physicists in history, said if you think you understand quantum mechanics, you don't understand quantum mechanics. So if you think this is really tough stuff to understand, it actually is. The greatest physicists in history have struggled with this, including Albert Einstein.
Yeah. Einstein did basically made much the same example. He was just using a bomb rather than a poison vial, which is what Schrodinger eventually went with for his example. And as you say, this is not a topic that really agrees well with our everyday experience. How we experience the macroscopic, non-relativistic universe is generally independent of this stuff. So the average person doesn't need to know this. Sort of the thing is that we understand the physics of our everyday environment so well that it has permitted us to go to smaller and larger length scales and time scales and make observations there. And once you start making observations there, it turns out that a lot of the fundamental, rules that we use to make logical inferences don't actually work out as well. Like the double slit experiment. If you were going, well, it either goes through one slit or the other, obviously. And if you put observers at the slits, you can make it go through one slit or the other. If you put it, my understanding is that if you put detectors at the slits,
yes.
then then you can make it behave in accordance with classical expectation. Yeah, but as soon and for me, this is where quantum mechanics just goes into this. A really weird realm. And I noticed that Clive Chat and Phil Bell are in the channel, and I can feel them judging me. My understanding comes from a very mathematical background, and to me, I don't necessarily think of quantum mechanics as being consistent with my classical mathematical training. Perhaps I didn't study enough abstract fields. I thought I was studying abstract stuff, but this stuff, as I said before, it blows my mind.
Yeah. Oh yeah, mine as well. Dr. Bell, I had asked him to be here, but life is happening, so yeah, he couldn't be here. But yeah, this stuff is well beyond. I have an undergrad degree in electrical engineering, and my master's degree has nothing to do with science. So most of this I picked up just from study that I've done on my own. I took physics 1 and 2 in college, and that's the extent of so I basically learned the basic laws of motion, Newtonian physics, and I've picked all this up on my own. So I hope I can be forgiven for my lack of understanding of it. But nobody really gets this yet. I mean, we're getting into the realms of where we're getting quantum supercomputers, and that's still only in university and laboratory settings, because you have to have cryogenics to even make the things work. I don't know if either one of you know much about quantum computing, but that's about all that I know of it. If it was ever to be a household item, we would have to come up with room temperature superconductors, which isn't even anywhere near on the horizon of our technology.
Yes, the term high temperature superconductor currently has a very unique definition of high temperature.
Right.
I'm not sure where they're up to, but it's nowhere near room temperature. It's
high temperature in the same way that astronomers call anything that's not hydrogen a metal.
Yeah, yeah,
pretty much, yes.
Because the cryogenics that they're using to get these superconductors is just a few degrees Kelvin. Yeah, if I am saying that correctly, it's almost absolute zero.
Yep. Clivewell says that quantum mechanics is, and he is a mathematical physicist at Cambridge University, no less. He says that quantum mechanics is consistent with mathematics, but counterintuitive from a classical sense. And I guess that's what I was trying to express is obviously my mathematical training is a bit more classical than quantum mechanics requires.
So Clive Wells, if you would like a link to come in and kind of help us out, then let me know in the chat and I'll find a way to get you on.
Yeah, there's entire mathematical bodies for predicting
as Jack was explaining earlier, there are multiple ways to explain. There are multiple theoretical frameworks that are consistent with Schrodinger's cat, and at this point, we're not that are consistent with the double slit experiment. And Niels Bohr didn't regard Schrodinger's cat as a problem. Because he really didn't think, he viewed observation as a completely different process than Schrodinger presented it in his thought experiment. That would have been my go-to. At the moment, we're still learning stuff, but a lot of the stuff going on here, at these extreme boundaries of where we can get to, it is there's just some weird and wonderful stuff going on. And I'd like to explore two of them at the sort of, you mentioned cryogenics. I actually work on I actually help do maintenance on a superconducting gravimeter. And basically it uses a niobium ball suspended in an electromagnetic field, and any force that acts on the ball, the movement of the ball immediately induces a current that will restore the ball back to its original position. So what you do is you measure the currents running through the instrument, and that tells you what forces are being applied to the niobium ball, and you use that.
So you got to have a superconductor to. So I'm assuming it's a pretty low amperage. So you got to have a superconductor to register.
That's
okay.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And so so routinely we have to refill it with liquid helium. And as we were discussing before with the Heisenberg uncertainty principle, liquid helium is so cold that the velocity of the helium atoms is actually very, very well defined. You know, they are really, really cold, so they can't be moving that fast. Their velocity is so small, but that makes their position highly uncertain. And this leads to some very, very weird effects. For instance, if you put liquid helium in a container, it can siphon itself out of the container because the particles are highly uncertain. So that upper surface of the liquid is actually subject to quantum fluctuations. And it can start sort of reaching up and then supplying a surface that the other particles can travel up through, because they don't want to sit still in the one position, and they start siphoning themselves out over the edge, and they drop out of the container. And when liquid helium was first sort of captured in large quantities, this happened, and the observers had been, the scientists doing the experiment had been working at this for about 40 hours with not much sleep, and they thought they were both hallucinating. So they went and got a janitor and asked him if he saw the same thing that they were seeing. They were so blown away by what's going on. And when you're trying to work out how much helium is in the dewar, what you do is you've got what's called a flutter stick, which is a thin tube with a balloon on the end, and you lower the flutter stick in, and when it's near the surface, that balloon will start to flicker. It will start to sort of flutter. It will expand and contract because the surface is wobbling up and down because of the uncertainty principle. So this is an instance of sort of a quantum effect that is macroscopically observable.
Yeah, that's pretty rare to have something observable like that. But it's also a good time for us to pick on flat earthers, because they always have their conspiracy theory that NASA uses the most helium of any agency, therefore satellites are carried by balloons. They don't understand that helium is primarily used in cryogenics, which is something that NASA does a lot of. So of course they're going to be one of the greatest consumers of helium. Just I figured I'd throw that in there.
Yeah, it's a really, really that's an excellent point. I hadn't actually heard them say that. So yeah, but it always blows me away that here's this magical, here is this stuff, these scientific results that are absolutely stunning in the way that they overturn classical expectation. And the flat earther's argument is, well, it looks flat to me, therefore it is. And you're just going, well, you've got no idea how limited your expectation and your perceptions are then. You've just got no concept of how much richer reality actually is, because there are vast layers of wondrous and beautiful complexity underlying just what we see.
Right.
That's one of the things that education does to you, and is the more education that I ever got, the more I understand how little I actually understand about the world. I'm sure you two have had the same experience. When you first learn a new concept, or you start learning about a new field, you're like, well, I know nothing about this. So you could almost forgive flat earthers who have almost zero education for thinking that they understand everything, because they don't know what they don't know. But Jack, you were wanting to say something?
Yeah, it amazes me that someone would try and argue that modern science is fake while using a computer or a phone that requires knowledge of quantum mechanics and the electrical engineering to actually be able to create these pieces of circuitry.
Yeah, it's stunning.
Yeah, and I wanted to talk about that some too, how quantum mechanics is responsible for the modern electronics that we have now. And this is going to require me to lean on you guys a little bit, but my understanding is that the circuitry, the chips that we use now, there's so many transistors crammed into the circuits that we use now that the basically electrons are being shared in a way that's only possible through quantum mechanics. Maybe one of you can expound on that a little bit more, but I know that electrons are shared between atoms, which isn't that uncommon, but
okay.
I said that very inarticulately, and I apologize.
Okay, so in metals, for instance, the electrons tend to end up delocalized. So they're, as you say, they're not as closely associated with the individual atoms as they sort of form a, the atoms form a crystalline structure, and the electrons have a greater degree of, have greater freedom of movement within that structure. As long as the charge is preserved, they're kind of okay with moving around. That's my understanding. Jack may.
My understanding of it drops off about the same point. I am way too early in my undergrad to be able to divulge much more.
Yeah, this is kind of the point where I'd like to have Phil Bell in here, because again,
Clive Wells.
Or Clive Wells.
My issue with it is I'm too far removed from university. It's been too many years ago for me to remember exactly how that works.
So I mean, delocalized electrons are they turn up in a couple of molecular structures, and they you tend to so benzene, for instance, the way it holds together, it forms a ring of carbon atoms, and there's sort of a probability cloud of electrons inside that ring. And the electrons are kind of shared in a way that will preserve the charge, so it will make for a neutrally charged construct. But the electrons, don't need to commit themselves to any one atom or any one bond to maintain a stable configuration.
Right. So Stringer News 1 in the chat is asking about electron flow versus hole flow in a circuit. And really, that's just dealer's choice. You can look at it as the electron flowing, or you can look at it as hole flow. I remember back in college, we used to have knockdown, drag-out arguments about whether electrons were flowing or the hole was flowing. And the hole being the spot where the electron has left as it jumps from one shell to the next. It just depends on how you want to look at it.
Yeah.
So I don't know, Jack. Can you speak to the Schrodinger equation at all, or is it?
I've had to do homework assignments with it, but as far as I'm concerned, it's an algorithm I use to solve problems, and that's all I need to know, and that's all I want to know.
Yeah, it is rather complicated. I mean, just me looking at it, I'm immediately tapping out. I know that has been one of the most useful equations that physicists have used. But I mean, half the symbols that are in it, I don't even know what the hell they mean.
Yeah, if you want me to have a go at explaining it.
But if you could just speak to how it's used and why it's so important.
All right, so it's very useful for determining what a particular quantum state might be. And it's just the rule of thumb, if you have a quantum system and you want to be able to predict some effect, you're going to need to use some wave equation, which we usually do. Like, how should I phrase this? The Schrodinger's equation is a wave function, and we can sort of tailor that specific wave function to any particular system. And in some cases, if you take the square of the amplitude of that wave, then what you get is what's called a PDF, a probability distribution function. And then from that, you can get, say, the probability of an electron at some distance from the nucleus of an atom. So it has various useful properties as far as actually explaining what the symbols are. I mean, if you ever actually look at it from the Google images or whatever, I is just the square root of -1. H bar is a particular constant, the reduced Planck constant. That upside down triangle is what's called a gradient. It's what's it called? It has to do with differentiating multivariable functions. And that big, funny, squiggly looking thing, that psi, it's a placeholder for some particular quantum mechanical state or effect that we can substitute in.
Yeah, I'm never going to try to solve one of those. I'm too far gone. Well, no, that's why we have guys like you around, so that I don't have to do that anymore. So
yeah, it makes me no, because like the engineers and physicists, there's always that sort of what's it called, rivalry, where engineers say physicists don't do anything useful, and then the physicist says, well, whenever something breaks, you ask us to come along and fix it for you.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I'm actually an engineer by profession. So, well, by education and profession. But yeah, after a while, when you're so far removed from the academic side of it, you lose a lot of this stuff. I mean, it's just like anything else. They're perishable skills and perishable knowledge that you lose touch with after a while. You kind of like when we're in these conversations, I'm thinking back and I'm like, yeah, I kind of remember that.
Yeah, I mean there is a point at which things get things become a bit more abstract than you are used to. So you're raised, when you're introduced to physics, you're introduced to the concept of here's a shell. It's being fired from a gun. It's got a velocity of v. It's being fired at an angle alpha. What's the vertical component? What's the horizontal component? If g is acting downward, how long will it take for the vertical velocity and the vertical component of velocity to drop to zero? How long will this shell be in the air? These are basic concepts, and we well understand them from our experience of how the world works.
Right,
but
classic mechanics.
Classical mechanics. But once you start getting into more sophisticated formulations, they start introducing somewhat abstract terms like the Lagrangian or the Hamiltonian of a system. And these things aren't necessarily well defined a priori. You need to work out what is the appropriate Lagrangian for a particular system by working out which model best accords with the observational characteristics that you have. But they do a lot of the mathematics without requiring that you have a model. They can start making general concepts about the Lagrangian without knowing what the Lagrangian necessarily refers to, what system it's governing, or what the terms in it are. And at that point, you're starting, you're sort of the classical mind, the classically minded physicist starts going, well, hang on, I'm a bit lost because I want these components. I want to know, I want to understand what's going on. And you kind of stepped into a greater degree of generality. Does that accord with sort of your experience, Jack?
Yeah, I'm in the mathematical physics, so I'm sort of looking at it from this perspective of modeling with pure mathematics. And especially in pure mathematics, you have to be able to take things as abstract concepts. You might have a very convenient real world interpretation. Like we start off teaching numbers as things to count with, but I can easily give you a number system that you can't count with. With vectors as arrows, but we can also easily show you a vector that you can't really draw as an arrow. So it's good to teach things or introduce a topic as some sort of real world tangible thing, but always keep in mind that it is just a abstract concept which we are applying in the real world.
It's funny. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No.
Well, you were saying Lagrangian and Hamiltonian, and it's funny that you said that because I already knew what Lagrangian was, but I literally just yesterday ran across the concept of Hamiltonian. So it's funny that you said that the day after I'd first heard that term.
Right. And again, so my undergraduate training was mostly it was almost exclusively mathematics, and I didn't do a single undergraduate physics course. So a lot of mathematical concepts like Hamiltonians, like Lagrangians, I learnt about from a purely mathematical, from a purely theoretical point of view, without any concept that they actually had a physical meaning whatsoever. So it's a bit weird that this stuff that I had studied turns out to be very strongly mathematically based. Or it was surprising to me anyway, because I was coming from a very sheltered background.
Although I will say that there are advantages towards approaching math from just the pure math perspective. Like there's this guy on YouTube, Flammable Maths, and he made some shots at physicists that just resonate with me so well. Like how physicists define a Hilbert space. Let necessary assumptions, let H be a Hilbert space, and just call it that.
It's sort of this is where I think that I just want to step back to a sort of generality here. where the physics really where modern physics really starts to take off, is at a point where the average person cannot just come along and read a couple of Google pages and then understand it. There is this insistence that science has to be democratic. Everybody must be able to do science, or at least that's how the flat earthers present it. And it's simply not the case that everybody has the required educational background or intellectual ability to understand what's going on at these with a lot of systems that we use every day. Engineers do take these things, do apply them, but when you get down into the physics of what's actually happening, it's very, very complicated.
Tony,
and just to answer Clive's question, he's asked me if I've ever studied symplectic geometry. No, I never did.
Well, they're saying in the chat, who else is, Marcianista specifically says, else in the chat is also pretending to understand what these guys are saying. And that kind of fits in with what you're just saying. Like we apply this stuff without necessarily fully understanding, because this is hard stuff, folks. This is really hard stuff.
Yeah, it is.
What Tony was just saying is, as far as just coming along and expecting that you're supposed to be able to understand this stuff is sort of like trying to build a house without a foundation.
Yeah.
So
I would disagree with Tony in where he said this is where modern physics. It's well before modern physics, like quantum and relativistic, where the average person drops off. Like, you know how we always talk about dropping a ball in a vacuum and it will fall at the same rate as a feather?
Yeah, that's the hard concept for a lot of people.
Yeah, well, it's not just that. I like to give that example because it shows the how gravity affects different objects at the same rate for a given distance for a given planet. But as the person who actually needs to do the math, it just makes the math so much easier because I don't need to use what's called a differential equation to factor in drag. And as soon as you have an atmosphere and you need differential models, the average person is just completely out of his realm, even if he's taking high school calculus.
Right. Yeah, well, this is I just want to make so getting into a discussion with a flat earther called Rachel. She you start with gravity. If you drop an unsupported, a heavy unsupported, if you drop an unsupported object, it will experience a downward acceleration. And she's going, well, what about a helium balloon? And
it's still experiencing that acceleration.
It's still experiencing a downward acceleration.
Yeah.
There are just other forces being applied to it, so that its net acceleration is upwards. But there's an expectation presented to people that we should be able to explain all of mathematics all at once in a way that makes sense, and they can chip in at any point with a question about a more complex aspect of the system, and you have to adapt. Well, that's actually not the way learning works. Learning works by establishing layers of understanding. We start with the simpler problems first. We make sure you understand those, and then we can go on to greater levels of generalization. And flat earthers sort of skip the point. They insist. I got into a discussion with one of them, and I said, "Well, don't you want to know? Don't you want to learn about this?" And he goes, "What I want is to understand physics as it is." And you just think, and I was stunned, and I'm thinking, because he wanted to move on to Einsteinian gravity, relativistic gravity, and you're just going, well, again, that really only applies in quite extreme circumstances. In most cases, you're never going to encounter that in your day-to-day life. There are devices that use, like GPS, for instance, that applies relativistic corrections. But generally, you go through your entire life without consciously dealing with this stuff. So why would you want to understand? Why in an introductory physics discussion would you need me to start explaining how Einsteinian gravity works? It's just not relevant. Let's start with the basics and move up from there.
It really only applies at speeds approaching the speed of light, or in the vicinity of a black hole, or some other really large gravitational well. But it's funny that you talk about the balloon that isn't, the flat earther would say it's not experiencing the gravitational, small g. Because that was one of the very first conversations I ever had with a flat earther back before I really knew what the whole flat earthers were about. And I got that same question. And I said, well, do you accept that more than one force can act on an object simultaneously? And the answer I got was no. And that was the very first time that I thought, then why am I even talking to you?
Yeah. And it's actually a little bit sinister the way they establish these thought patterns and responses. They insert them, and they do so in a way where they're not explicitly saying, you're going to need to explain the entirety of physics in this one conversation. Otherwise, science is a lie and you're a failure. They don't say that. They just keep on asking questions that drive you into more and more abstract branches of physics, to the point where either you simplify so that they leap on the simplification, or they're just
have
not
to
going
say,
to.
I don't know. Yeah.
Well, even generally, I will get far enough that I can get far enough. But you do get to points where it's not just a matter of I don't know; it's a matter of science doesn't know.
Right. And they see that as a gotcha.
Yeah.
I mean, so in my experience, there's two diagnostics that I find are very useful because you know how those guys on what's called Globebusters, they say how they're experts in physics and math, and you hear them being cited as experts by their flat earthers all the time. And the way I would give them a simple diagnostic question is, okay, if you think you're so smart, answer me these two questions. One of them's math related, one of them's physics related. Why is it that a scale is inaccurate if you were to use it on a carpet? That's the physics question. The math question is a horizontal line function linear?
Right.
And they usually get both of them wrong. Well, actually, no, I shouldn't say that. They always get both of those questions wrong when they claim to be experts at math and physics, because they can't understand the concept of a net force for the carpet question. They think that, okay, because there's a spring sort of a cushioning by the carpet, that means that the force acting on the pressure plate for whatever you're weighing is going to be less. Well, no. If once your scale has settled on the carpet, the force of the object is going to be the same. It's inaccurate because it might be uneven. And as for the line question, a horizontal line is not a linear function, which is just a very
that blows their mind
for someone who claims to be good at math.
Right. Yeah. If the audience has any questions, I'll start fielding those as we talk a little bit farther.
Actually, if you don't mind, just because I have the uncertainty principle just sort of stuck in my head, I have another more classical example of it that might work a little.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So I think even flat earthers can understand that radar exists. I hope.
I've had some talks with them where they understand it exists, but they don't understand it the way that it actually works.
Yeah. All right. So let's
just say they certainly reject the possibility that you can measure the distance to Venus and the Sun with radar. So
So let's say that you have some sort of antenna and it's emitting a continuous frequency of electromagnetic radiation. So let's just graph that here. Here we have, let's say, time, and here we're going to have frequency. And I'll just make a very simplified square wave. Let's say we get these little pulses. And so what a lot of radars will do is they'll emit what's called a carrier wave, a continuous carrier wave, and then they'll modulate it either by frequency or amplitude. In this case, I just did frequency for the sake of it, but you can also do amplitude. Now, these pulses, we can measure the return pulse as well. So when, let's say we do a pulse like that, and hits an object, they're going to get reflected back. And so whereas they're going in this direction initially, when they get reflected back, you get these little pulses going in the other, oh my God, I can't draw for the life of me, going in the other direction. Now, what happens if we were to increase the length of these modulations? Well, if you were to make your pulse extremely long, then you start to get this problem because let's say here's your antenna, and here's the object you want to measure. It's a plane. I cannot draw planes for the life of me. Yeah, that's good enough. Well, if it was just the one object, then using a big pulse, small pulse doesn't really matter. But you're going to have all these other objects, cluttering in the way. And if you have this one big pulse, you can't really tell what's reflecting what. And so the obvious sort of way of correcting this is just to send a little pulse. That way you get these individual reflections that are very distinct from one another as the radar energy hits these objects. And they're going to come back, if we draw a graph again, they're going to come back in these very tiny intervals, or rather these very distinguishable intervals, and so we get very low uncertainty in the distance to these objects. But radar isn't also used for measuring distance, it's also used for measuring speed. And we're going to use what's called a Fourier transform. I'm not going to go into the math of that, but just what you need to know is that it takes a wave of amplitude, and it converts it into the frequency of that wave, or rather the set of harmonic frequencies for that wave. And that's useful because with what's called the Doppler effect, we can use that to measure the velocity of an object. But the longer the duration of the pulse, the better our Fourier transform is going to be at discerning these individual frequencies. And even if we don't use a proper radar algorithm, you get someone who has what's called perfect pitch. And if you play a note for them on an instrument like a piano, they should be able to read back to you what that note was. If you play a C without telling them, they'll tell you played a C. Now snap your fingers. That's going to create a very short pulse, whereas if you play a note on piano, you get a very big amplitude, or rather a very big interval. If you snap your fingers, it's a very short interval. And that person with perfect pitch might not be able to tell what that note was, because you have such a short duration that you can't discern the frequency. And so we get this uncertainty principle where with radar, you can either get very good acuity with distance, or you can get very good acuity with velocity, but you can't have both at the same time. And that doesn't require any sort of quantum mechanics.
Yeah, I've seen that in practice, because when I was in the Navy, we used radar all the time. And yeah, I saw that in practice a lot.
Oh, you in the U.S. Navy?
Yeah, for 22 years.
What ships?
Oh, God. Enterprise, Kennedy, Eisenhower, Monsoon, Typhoon, Kearsarge, and San Antonio.
Hey. That new San Antonio, that amphibious assault ship?
Yeah, LPD-17, yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, I was the anti-terrorism officer on there.
I wish we could just send you after all the flat earthers because they're attacking people's intellect.
Yeah, they do, yes. While claiming that they have intellect.
Yes.
So, are there any questions? I haven't seen any questions. Have you, Dave? I don't know if you're tracking the chat.
Golden Skeptic has one. If mass affects the gravitational force of objects, why do flat earthers conflate Einstein with Newton?
Oh, that's a tactic. It's nothing more than a tactic. It's a way for them to muddy the waters. So if you bring up gravity, a lot of the flat earthers, especially from the Nathan Oakley school of flat Earth, will immediately say, "Well, which gravity are you talking about?" It's simply a tactic to muddy the water to avoid answering a question about gravity. I'm sure, Tony, you got
Yeah, I mean the reality. So the reality is that they're the same, right? So Newtonian gravity applies across particular circumstances, and Einsteinian gravity applies over a larger spread of circumstances, but they coincide almost exactly over the range of circumstances that Newtonian gravity was derived for. So Newtonian gravity was derived using observations of planetary motions around the sun, and Newton was able to derive the form of gravity from analysis of those observations. And it took a while to work out that actually they weren't getting the orbit of Mercury exactly right. That there was there was a small but significant, there was a small but measurable difference between the Newtonian predictions and the actual observations. And Einstein was able to explain this using relativity, using it, and the theory was later validated by the Eddington experiment. But it took the reason it took a few hundred years to get to the point where new theoretical developments were being introduced was because Newtonian gravity worked perfectly well. In fact, it worked better than perfectly well. No engineer I can't think of an engineering application that actually relies on Newtonian gravity. For engineering purposes, you just say, well, gravity is a force. It accelerates stuff downwards at a constant rate. That's all engineers need to know. And that theory of gravity is accurate enough that our buildings stay up, our bridges work, and our planes fly.
And we go to the moon.
Well, once you once you go to the moon, you kind of need you're in the Newtonian realm. But to me, there is just this intellectual mendacity that there is just this fallacious discrimination between Newtonian and Einsteinian. For the observations that Newton had, Newtonian gravity worked extraordinarily well. And to suggest it's just flawed and needs to be thrown out is gibberish. Einsteinian gravity agrees thoroughly, as I say, almost exactly. The discrepancies are so small; they are vastly smaller than our observational error.
Right. Welcome, Team Skeptic.
Hello.
Your mic's a little low.
Okay, I'll turn it up right now. It should be better.
Oh, there you go. That's perfect.
Is that too loud now?
No, that's good.
Okay, good deal. Still learning my Go XLR mixer. How you guys doing today?
We're good. We've moved on to bashing flat earthers, but before we continue, give us your take on what is Schrodinger's cat. Besides a really cool YouTuber.
Schrodinger's Cat is the second most amazing YouTuber on the internet behind some fucking idiot named Team Skeptic. But that's a topic for another discussion, another day. Schrodinger's Cat is evidence that the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics must be true.
Oof.
Well, I would dispute that, but
I would dispute that very much.
I would suggest that the Schrodinger's cat suggests invites the many worlds interpretation as a possible explanatory mechanism, but we don't need that. There are alternative explanatory mechanisms that work equally well. So we don't have to choose one at this point.
You're right. There's no need to choose one because everything we have already works out, no matter which interpretation you look at it through. But at the same time, I believe that when you look at something like the Copenhagen interpretation, you have to invite in mystical things to occur. So like collapsing of wave functions, which isn't described by any science. It's just something that we say happens because it's observationally, it's explained by observation, but we have no mechanism to describe why or how a wave function collapses. When at the same time, we don't need that when we're talking about the many worlds interpretation. We can, we just simply use the Schrodinger's equation as it's designed to be used, and that's what it tells us occurs.
Well, I'm not so sure about that because, I mean, a wave function is just, it's not a physical thing. It's just a mathematical construct that we use because it's very good for approximating reality. And as far as the mechanism for which it collapses, it's just an axiom that we hold to be true in the same way that we would use for the many worlds interpretation. And we use axioms for defining not just mathematical systems, but any sort of mechanics in physics whatsoever, including relativistic. We define the way matter behaves within certain contexts, and we use these axiomatic principles that we just hold to be true. For example, mass is attracted to more mass. That's not something that we need in a way of explaining why. We just take it to be true.
Yeah,
I mean,
it is not. So I want to say this: if you're an adherent of the many worlds approach, you're not wrong by any stretch of the imagination. But I don't think we can at the moment demonstrate that the other possible interpretations are wrong either. They're all equally effective at explaining what we can observe. But in terms of the Schrodinger's cat thought experiment, where you say it is evidence that the many worlds approach must hold, I would suggest that it's approach that it's evident. It suggests that some explanatory mechanism must hold, and many worlds is one of those explanatory mechanisms. There are other ones that work, and it's possible that the answer is one that we haven't considered yet. So we don't even need to say that one of the models we've so far generated must be the case. It could be the case that there exists a model consistent with our observations that we haven't, that has not been thought of, that has not yet been formulated. But we'll get there in the end. But yeah.
I think the many worlds interpretation is probably the most fun, but the Copenhagen is the most parsimonious.
Well, I mean, we could get into energy conservation and stuff like that if we had to, but it would be, it's just the way they interpret Copenhagen is to just assume that everything, that other options no longer exist and that only one option exists. Let's say we're looking as in like a which path demonstration, when you measure it, you say, oh, well, all the energy that we assumed was going down one path, it no longer is going down that one path. Now the energy is conserved, but why is the energy in two different spots when unobserved, for instance, when unmeasured, when we don't know which path it takes, it appears as though the energy splits until there is a measurement, and at that point all the energy appears to be in one spot. That would be that would be something that needs to be explained before I could fully accept the Copenhagen interpretation.
And that's a fair point. I think, however, that there are strengths and weaknesses. There are different strengths and different weaknesses with each of these approaches, and there are certainly positive arguments to be made in favor of the many worlds interpretation. And Clive Wells is in the chat backing you up, team.
Is he really? He's backing me up. Yeah. I love that guy. I love him even more now.
He says that the advantage of the relative state formulation as opposed to Copenhagen is that we do not need to draw a distinction between observer and experiment. So there you go. But he also says that it is in an earlier post that it's equivalent to ordinary quantum mechanics, just a reformulation of the theory. So there's I think the only issue, again, I don't think you're wrong. I just think that there are other potential explanations, and we can't yet commit to one of them. You can have a preference.
Tony, just know this right here, okay? The other one of you thinks I'm right, all right? The smart version of you thinks I'm right.
I'm not sure that he said you. I'm not sure that he said.
But
team was right.
There's another version of you that is abso-fucking-lutely balls to the walls, idiot fucking wrong too. So don't play that card.
What's your Skeptic's background?
Radar tech in the Navy.
Hey.
But I heard you ask him. I heard you ask him. Well, I wouldn't technically be classified. I mean, I went out on a couple of ships. I had to get qualled on a ship, but I wouldn't technically qualify me as a sailor since I did spend all my time shore duty.
Okay.
Right.
Now, whenever I hear some bring up the many worlds, it immediately rings alarm bells because I don't mind people using it in the correct context, but because sci-fi things exist. Usually
I'm a bit more well versed than the sci-fi TV explanation of what it is. I have a pretty decent understanding of it, enough of it to say that I think that it's more correct than Copenhagen. It's just it's a more elegant explanation. It relies on less assumptions and less axioms. I mean, you're right. Copenhagen relies on an axiom, the axiom that the collapse of the wave function does occur. We assume that it occurs because that's what we observe. I mean, by all honesty, that's what we observe. So it's, it doesn't matter which interpretation you take to get to the answer. You're going to get to the right answer. You're going to come to the same answer, and it's going to be the right answer.
Well, the many worlds doesn't have legal marijuana, and Copenhagen does, so it wins.
Bullshit.
I'm at that point in my education where I know not enough to be able to tell you all the ins and outs about the way you would explain the calculations in either interpretation, but I know enough to throw up when I'm watching Star Trek.
So Clive Wells has gone on to say that he agrees with Team Skeptic. I agree with @Team Skeptic. There you go. A simple declarative sentence and Team Skeptic. Based on my discussions, just to address Jack's question, I think that Team is significantly more knowledgeable than I am as far as quantum mechanics is concerned. Coming from I come from a mathematics / geophysics background.
That's funny because I'm stuck on the math, Tony. I'm stuck on that. That's where legitimately that's where I'm trying to teach myself tensor math right now.
I was. I'm just reading a book on general relativity, and I always get. Tensor calculus was not something that we actually did as an undergraduate studies. Clive's talking about Hilbert spaces and that sort of thing. So but we didn't get to tensor calculations, and so sort of it's still something that I struggle a little bit to wrap my head around. But yeah. So, but it's Clivewell says if I want to think about the wave function of the universe, etc., then you don't have an observer, so it is attractive for that reason. Yeah, I don't necessarily think that observer is, I can abstract the concept of observer. I don't, I'm with Bohr on this one. I don't need an observer in the same way that say Schrodinger presented an observer. So I don't regard that as a problem. But again, and this is something that you never hear flippers say, right? This isn't my area of expertise, and I'm not, and I'm not.
Well, see, when you have a pre-drawn conclusion, Tony, it's real easy to ad hoc an explanation that automatically points towards your pre-drawn conclusion. So with them, it's not about learning; it's about validating the flat Earth. So if you tell them they're wrong, then they just explain to you how they're actually not wrong because it does still pertain to the flat Earth.
And what I find really funny about flat Earth is they assume that by reading something off a Wikipedia page, they are automatically experts about it. I mean, the elementary stuff needed to understand general relativity. Like that's 4th year or 3rd year stuff for me, and I'm in my 2nd year right now. And so it's going to take half a decade just to cover the general concept of general relativity. And then when we get into specific applications or very...
Did something just happen?
Well, yeah, what just happened?
I think he just cut out. The many worlds god said, "No, you will not go against what
Jack? Did we lose Jack?
Shut his inner
Jackie says his tablet just died.
Plug your tablet in, Jack.
But yeah, saying that it's the difference between many worlds and Copenhagen interpretation is nowhere similar to the difference between flat and globe Earth. Now there are certain conventions that you can take on to use the flat Earth map as a navigational map, for instance. Knowing if you know that the flat Earth map is a 2D representation of a 3D map, then you can absolutely use it because you just make the correct the correct mathematical corrections to the map, and you can then it becomes it becomes representative of the real world. So, but it's completely different than what we're talking about. We're talking about two different paths that we can both take to arrive to the same conclusion at the same time. It's like
that's right.
We walk out the house, you choose path A, I choose path B. We don't know what each other's doing, and we still will arrive at the same destination every single time in the same amount of time. So it's something worth philosophically talking about, but when it comes, we have yet to reach a position in our reality where the knowing which one of those interpretations are right is significant to our daily lives. You know what I'm saying? Like making, like using, like, let's say we wanted to travel to the stars right now, to the nearest star, right? We can't really, the knowing the difference between the Copenhagen interpretation and the many worlds interpretation isn't going to get us there faster. So it's pointless. But it doesn't matter whether you take 2 quantum physicists on the trip. One of them is a many worlds interpretationist, one of them is a Copenhagen interpretationist, and they do science experiments on the trip based on their interpretations. They're still always going to come to the same conclusions, and the trip's still going to take just as long to get there. When you look at the flat Earth, if you say, well, you have 2 sailors, one of them who's navigating via a globe Earth, one of them who's navigating via a flat Earth in the southern hemisphere, let's say, they're not going to come to the same conclusions in the same amount of time. It's going to take one person significantly longer because they're wrong and they're trying to apply it to a real world application. So that's why it's okay for us to talk about that, talk about stuff like that freely. And even if we're wrong, it's still okay because it has nothing to do with our daily routine right now.
Well, this is actually something that frustrates me a little bit in the discussion with flat earthers, because what you just described is, if there are two theories, if there are two competing theories, two potential explanatory mechanisms, as long as they both agree with the observations as far as we can determine, and they have, then we can't discriminate between them. There are elements of parsimony. There are elements of of plausibility. If I explain that actually there's no such thing as electrons, there are just unicorn farts that are being transported backwards and forwards, then I may be able to explain everything as long as my unicorn farts turn out to be identical to electrons. But yes, that's right. But that doesn't make them actual unicorn farts. In that context, we are informed by comparing the theory with the observations, and what flat earthers do is they say, well, actually, observation isn't science. It has to be an experiment, and it has to be an experiment that's done this way. So if I've got an object, if I've got any object, I've got my mouse in front of me, and I can see what shape it is. I don't need to do an experiment about what shape it is. I can see it. It just strikes me as absolutely ludicrous that for people who go on about the importance of science, they disregard the significance of observation, and that
disregard
everything
science in general.
Yes, they disregard science.
There's a question from the chat that I kind of like. Do you think that sovereign citizens are dumber than flat earthers, or are they at the same IQ level? I'll answer first. A lot of the sovereign citizens, or a lot of the flat earthers that I've run across, are sovereign citizens. So yeah. I'd say they're just about the same.
I told him if there was a Venn diagram of the two, it would just be a circle.
Yeah. Yeah, I've said that before, that if you take sovereign citizens, flat earthers, and anti-Semites and make a Venn diagram, it's one single circle.
It's that, which is just the weirdest thing to me. Like, how does that? No, I can't wrap my head around it. But whatever.
I don't think I've run across a flat earther who was not an anti-Semite.
Yeah, it seems to be. It seems to come
even
up.
The Jewish ones.
Yeah.
It does seem. It certainly seems to hold true. It's just inexplicable to me. I don't understand any anti-Semitism from the get-go, but it just seems weird that it erupts at these points.
Well,
I have noticed actually that a lot of climate denialists are anti-Semites.
Well, just to put that in perspective, the Flat Earthers at the Flat Earth Conference invited Owen Benjamin, who is absolutely known for his anti-Semitic jokes.
Rabid anti-Semite.
And he was given he was invited to have not just a platform to speak, but he was given an entire, the stage for a set at their main event. So yeah.
Wow.
I have a video, it's still up on my channel, about him back when I used to do flat earth debunking. That was, the end of the video was just about 5 minutes of him just saying, the Jews, the Jews, the Jews, the Jews, and none of them were the same clip. All of them were individual different times that he said that on his channel. It was about 5 minutes of him just saying the Jews.
He was on David Weiss's channel. David Weiss, a Jew.
Yeah, Weiss. His name is Weiss, for Christ's sake.
But I mean, you know, like they will set aside their personal beliefs, right? They will set it aside if they believe that it will help them in their, because flat Earth to them is everything. It's the success of flat.
Yeah.
To be a true flat earther like David Weiss, Jeranism, all these people, you have essentially put all your eggs into one basket. That the shape of the Earth is flat.
It's a cult.
Everything depends on that.
Yeah, it is a cult, and I've heard them say this, that once we get society to accept that the Earth is flat, everything else will fall into place.
Yeah, I've been threatened with lawsuits by them over the internet.
All right.
Yeah, so it was an online question and answer forum, and maybe I was a little mean here. I told one of them that he likely had a chromosome disorder, and his response was, "I'm going to sue you for what was it, slander and defamation." Yeah. Well, I explained to them that, well, one, you're in a different country. Good luck with that. Second of all, one of the requirements to sue me in the country I live in is that you need to show that not only is this false and that it was intended to harm you, but it actually caused some sort of
cause damage. Yeah.
So I would love for him to show in court how my telling him that he has a chromosome disorder because he thinks the Earth is flat is affecting his income.
And he'd have to show that, and he'd also have to show that he doesn't have an extra chromosome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, could be wrong too.
Well, plus, if he's a flat earther, he likely doesn't have a job. So,
but it's I've noticed actually that there's some. I'm getting weird ass contacts from people who want to be my friend or who are asking me for stuff. And it all seems, sort of, you're just going, well, actually, this isn't the way you should be doing this. And if I respond to this, I've had people send emails to my work email account. You're sending personal emails to my work email account. That isn't appropriate. And if I respond from my work email account, I'd be, doing something wrong. So it seems like, these are sort of online traps for beginners. But it just shows to me a particularly sinister sort of mindset that they're prepared to sort of, take these paths to achieve their objectives. People like Bev or that sort of thing. They're prepared to be really, really harmful in pursuing their agenda.
Yeah, the thing that I've been dealing with lately is copyright claims. I had one recently. What I used was clearly fair use, and so he did a copyright claim. I made a video about this guy who got arrested twice for doing exactly the same thing. He was so stupid he did it again and got arrested again. So he made a copyright strike against the video, and so I wrote him, because they give you the person's email when they say, "Hey, your video got taken down because of this." I wrote him and just said, very politely, you made this copyright claim that my video was fair use, and that's punishable by law, making a false copyright claim. And he wrote back all about how he wants me and everybody like me and all the police and everybody to die in a fiery death and all this. Eventually, YouTube put my video back because it was fair use. And this whole time, this intervening 2 weeks, this guy was constantly sending me emails telling me about how he wanted me and everybody to die and all this. So once the video went back up, I made another video about how, I did just screen captures of all of the emails that he had sent me. And how I taunted him a little bit at the end about, hey, my video got put back and all this. And he tried to copyright that video because I had screen captures of the emails that he sent me.
Flat Earthers do it too, though. Flat Earthers do it too. Look what they did to Slice Barcane. Slice Barcane mirrored Sean Hufford's live stream. So obviously it has nothing to do with FE Core, right? It's Sean Hufford's live stream of a street in somewhere in Indiana. I forget even where it was, but it was supposedly
where their little headquarters was.
Where their headquarters was, right? So Slice Barcane mirrors that. They do a copyright strike on it. It's not even their video, and if they're claiming that's not their headquarters, why do they get the copy? Like, you can't stop someone from taking pictures of your building and claim, oh, that's a copyright. That's nothing to do with copyright.
Yeah. Well, my story gets better because I just learned this yesterday, and I got a really great chuckle out of it. The guy that tried to do both of the copyright claims against me. So when he tried to do the second one, YouTube didn't even take down the video. They just basically told him to pound sand, and they just sent me a notification saying, hey, he tried to take down your video. We didn't do it. So I wrote it back again, just, said, haha, bitch. And so I noticed yesterday, because I went back to just to take a look and see if he had made a rebuttal video or anything. He has changed his channel name to Schrodinger's Cat. Yeah, try to wrap your head around that.
Well, makes sense. I'm sure it makes sense from the many worlds interpretation. There are multiple Schrodinger's cats.
Only if his I was gonna make a.
There's a 0% chance. There's a 0% chance that this guy knows what Schrodinger's cat means.
I think what he's trying to do is actually establish some claim that when you make a video, he has some rights over it or something like that.
I assume so. It's not going to work.
It's flagrantly idiotic, but whatever keeps him off the streets, I guess.
Yeah, and his icon is a burning American flag, which anybody who knows my channel and searches Schrodinger's Cat and sees that icon is going to know that's not me anyway.
Yeah. But to some extent, like I'm not sure. Getting back to your original question about whether or not sovereign citizens or flat earthers are dumber. I don't think that sovereign citizens have to do anything on an intellectual level.
No, they just have to misunderstand some stuff from YouTube.
Yeah. Flat earthers do have a some sort of intellectual
gymnastics.
That they go through. I guess the sovereign citizens do as well when they start talking about not being subject, not being not having a last name, not having a not being a corporate entity, not entering into agreement, etc., etc.
Yeah. In my view, sovereign citizens, they're kind of like what are those? What's that cult name? Scientology. Whereas flat earthers are more like Jehovah's Witnesses. All of them have cult-like characteristics, but whereas Jehovah's Witnesses and flat earthers will evangelize and try and spread their beliefs, Scientologists, that's why I'm using the analogy here. Scientologists and sovereign citizens, they mostly keep them to themselves.
Yeah, I've never heard. I've always seen those flat earthers that go out and set up their little booth and everything. I don't think I've ever seen sovereign citizens do that. So that's a good point.
Yeah, Nathan Thompson was harassing uni students in one U.S. state. I remember that much.
Yeah.
Oh, and elementary school kids.
That too.
South Carolina, I believe.
Yeah, I had a flat earth in real life harass people, and it was at Walmart. And
oh Jesus.
There's this 80-year-old lady who's trying to get her grocery cart back to her cart or back to her vehicle, and this he looks like Nathan Thompson, so it might have actually been him. He's got the same Taliban beard, and just going around and like, oh, it's all fake. They say that the sun's at the center of the solar system, blah blah blah. And I'm listening, like, leave the old lady alone. Come on.
Yeah,
it was such a big move on his part.
Yeah, there used to be the guy, Brother Ernest. Team, do you remember that dude, right?
Oh yeah, I know who Brother Ernest is.
Oh,
he used
God,
to go,
Brother Ernest.
Yeah, he used to go to all the, like, MIT and places like that, and he would just scream at the students.
Yeah.
And now he has had this great epiphany where he's not a flat earther anymore. He has graduated to now he's a concave earther.
Convex Earth.
Yeah.
Convex Earth, right? Yeah.
No, concave.
Oh yeah, concave.
Oh, so
yeah,
he went to Lord
and
Stephen
just
Christ.
As annoying as he ever was.
Did he go full Lord Stephen Christ, or is he just postulating concave? Because, like,
actually, now that you mentioned, I think he did go the Lord Stephen Christ route.
Oh, wow.
He's in jail, from what I understand. I think he's actually in prison, and one of his devotees has taken up the mantle. And I think Brother Ernest falls underneath him now.
Oh, yeah. Are we talking about Jason McCormack? Because that guy's been around a while, too.
I think so, because I heard him in a debate. I almost think it was FTFE, but it couldn't have been. He debated somebody like maybe 6 months ago, and he had that other dude on with him. And he was talking about how stupid Flat Earth was. I'm like, you were the dude that was on the street corner screaming about Flat Earth
I was going to say that.
Years.
When I last either talked to him or saw him in a live stream, he was bashing the shit out of flat earthers, and I was like, "What the fuck? You're a flat earther, you know?"
Yeah, it was probably the same one that I saw.
He's like, "I don't believe in that shit. That's stupid." He's like, "It's a concave Earth," and I'm like,
"Yeah,
you're no better. You're no better."
Right?
Okay.
Like, I first met Jason McCormack when Soundly was doing his 24/7 live streams back in 2017. And him and I just got to do it. And he sent me this meme that says "F you, Boole" on it. I have it to this day because he's such a dope. He looks like...
Oh, that's great.
He looks like the love child of Kyle Curtis and a Neanderthal. I'm not kidding.
Well, Brother Ernest looks a lot like Flat Earth Aussie Jesus. Like, they could be from the same, like, little West Virginia town.
Yeah, right. They could live in the same mountain in Kentucky.
Yeah. That's perfect.
But I do think you're right, though, Jack, about the comparison of the two. Definitely, Flat Earth tries to get out more and proselytize, or whatever the word that is. You know, where they're trying to preach their beliefs to the general public, where sovereign citizens you don't typically see sovereign citizens having a sovereign citizen meetup, you know, where they all get together at an IHOP and pat each other on the back for fucking being retarded. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's not that
they fight their battles on the side of the road with a cop.
Yeah, exactly. But I think, though, when you think of how a sovereign citizen is, that the term, the way it describes them, describes also the reason that they're that way, because they're going to be your true loners of society. You know, you have, involuntarily, you have incels, right? Involuntarily celibate. And then you have people who are voluntarily celibate. You know what I mean? Like, you have people who are involuntarily ostracized from society, which is flat earthers, who desperately try to be a part of society but can't because they're flat earthers. And then you have sovereign citizens who don't want to be a part of the society, who actively push themselves off. So they will be more of your solo person. You know, they'll find friends who share beliefs and whatnot, but they're not going to have meetups and hangouts, you know?
Yeah.
Sorry, I'd stepped away from the mic.
Well, another thing I notice about surfers too is they want to spread it. They are actively trying to push it on people, like Nathan Thompson, whereas a Sovcit doesn't really care if we're sheep or not.
They should
don't.
make body-sized condoms for fucking flat earthers so they can't spread it.
I love your
One that you
brother.
can
I
fill
love
up
your
at the
brother.
bottom, still up at the bottom.
I love your brother. Dude, some of the shit you come up with is great. I love it. Oh, man.
All right, so we're gonna wrap this up, or what do we want to do?
Up to you, mate.
It looks like we maybe. Let me see if I got. This looks like there's a question in here. Does anyone here on the panel think that Riley or Slappy the Clown? Okay, somebody wants to know if Riley or Nathan Oakley actually think that the Earth is flat, and I'm saying emphatically no. Neither one of them do at all.
They've already when that little email of theirs came out, or that little Hangouts message that they shared between each other came out. I can't think of the person who put it out there. It's very typical of someone who's trying to hide what, you know, if you're playing a role, right? If you're playing a character that you honestly and truly don't want to be discovered, then you're going to want things like that to not come out. And that's exactly what that type of message was like, hey, watch out. You're getting us, you're getting too close to the fire. We're going to get burned. All of our costumes are going to be burned off, and we're going to be exposed for the people we truly are, which are just a bunch of fucking globe-believing idiots that think that they're going to make a few dollars off of fucking flat Earth.
Yeah, so what that was all about was Riley was on a panel, or Riley was in a debate or something, and he was talking about Lighthouse, I believe it was, and Nathan Oakley sent him a message that he thought was private, but it wasn't private, that said, told Riley to stop talking about what he was talking about because it was a flat Earth killer. So if Nathan Oakley knows that there's a flat Earth killer out there.
Perfect globe proof.
Yes.
Perfect globe proof.
Yeah, so if he knows that that's out there, then he knows that there is a globe.
Yeah.
And there's plenty of people that took screenshots.
Okay. No. The proper terminology is he knows it's not flat. He doesn't know that it's a globe, but he definitely knows it's not flat. Because I mean that's what that exposed him for, is to say that this is not a globe, this is not a flat Earth. He knows that it's not flat. He just is milking that for every dollar he can. I would not be surprised if one day he comes out and be like, I fucking fooled you all for years. Years I had you fooled.
Yep. He seems to be just that sort of dick. And I mean, my concern is that as the market of gullible individuals contracts, he's going to get more and more intense about siphoning resources out of the few disciples he's got left. Not too long ago, he had this thing, the last flat Earth debate ever, which turned out to be an intense money-making drive to get him a new computer. I kind of think that, he's going, as the desperation inside that community builds, he's going to exploit that to get more and more donations out of people, which makes me, kind of concerned for the victims of his scam.
Yeah, he's really desperate to not have to go actually get a job. Because right now, I mean, really all he has to do, he doesn't prepare any sort of a script for his show or anything. He just comes on for a couple hours a day and just talks nonsense. And that's his entire livelihood.
Yeah.
So he only has to work 2 hours a day.
Sorry, go on, Tim.
Well, I was going to say, it's unfortunate when you're not actually an entertaining person.
Yeah.
Excuse me. When you have a gimmick, okay, your gimmick might work for a while. Like for him, flat Earth is his gimmick. So he can make money off of flat Earth as long as flat Earth is viable. Professor Dave ended flat Earth. Sorry, guys. Professor Dave killed you guys. I mean, when he put out his videos, there was just no comeback from the flat Earth. Nobody truly addressed him. Globe Busters, the biggest, really most iconic flat Earth, excuse me, most iconic flat Earth channel out there. They did a half-ass attempt that really made them look even worse than they already looked just by shutting up and not saying anything. That's what they really should have done. Is they really shouldn't have said anything. They should have just played it off as if that never happened and continued pushing flat Earth. But they couldn't, because they had to address Professor Dave, and then once they addressed Professor Dave, they really exposed themselves. At that point, flat Earth died. That was the moment that flat Earth was like that. The hot air was let out of the balloon. You know, you're not going to evacuate all the air. There's still a few hot air balloons out there floating around, but go look at analytics on any one of these channels. Go look at what the 150,000 channel, I think that they're 150, maybe it's 120, 125,000 channel or 1,000 subscriber channel Globebusters has. Go look at their last video and look at how many views it has.
Yeah, I get
flat Earth
more
is
than
dead.
they do. Yeah.
Yeah, we all do. We all get more than they do.
Yeah.
Go look at Nathan Thompson, 15,000, I think, something like that. Subscribers can't fucking.
Whoa, your mic is going really weird there.
Somebody's making noise. Okay, it's gone.
Was that my mic?
I don't know.
I don't know. It also impacted Jack as well. So when Jack was speaking, I heard the same effect. So I don't think it was your mic.
Oh, okay.
I almost said this earlier, and I didn't know if I was remembering correctly, so I didn't. But luckily, Dr. Bell wrote it in the chat, because I remembered that Oakley and Riley had told Dr. Bell specifically that they were not flat earthers. So he just wrote this comment in the chat, and I'll read it out. They told me explicitly, Riley said there is no science for FE, and Oakley said he's entitled to earn from his content, and if people want to pay to hear FE, that's his business.
So I'm okay with that. Okay, I'm actually okay with that position.
But it is a scam.
But he needs to be honest about his position. He's not honest about his position.
Otherwise, he's scamming.
He's scamming, yeah. Otherwise, he's scamming because, like right now, if people are donating to him thinking he's a flat earther, then he's really taking money from. He's just taking their money. Now, if he's playing the role of, he's not making it obvious. So it's not like he can ever come back and go, no, it was so obvious that I was faking that I was a flat earther. Y'all just didn't pick up on it. It's not obvious. So you're literally scamming people right now if you're taking their money and you're not a flat earther.
Right. If I go see David Copperfield, I know that he's doing an illusion.
Right.
You know, that's not what they're doing. They are pretending like it's real.
Yeah. So that, Uri Geller recently came out and admitted that, obviously he was scamming the entire fucking time.
Did he really?
Yep. And it's just, there's no, poor Uri, my ass. But it's obviously a last-ditch attempt to get some attention and screw some more money out of this market. You don't get to persist with this for decades, and attack people who debunk you, and then at the end go, it was just a scam. No, you fuckwit. If you're not going to be honest through you don't get to be honest just at the end. You've got to be honest all the way through. Otherwise, you're a scam artist. It's just a con. And it's frustrating. It's frustrating to me because it just shows such a cynically malicious attitude towards the people you're talking to. If you're just going to feed them bullshit, feed them what they want to hear, but pretend that it's sincere. It just
and they have victims like Arwen, for example,
Yeah.
who is clearly not. I'm not a psychologist. I'm not going to diagnose the dude, but let's be honest. Arwen is not well equipped to deal with
High issues.
Okay, yeah, you said it. I didn't have to. And let's look at the life that the poor guy lives, and he's basically their doormat. He goes on to the Oakley show. They kick him around a little bit and pat him on the head, and then the next day, wash, rinse, and repeat. He's their victim.
Yeah.
Can you imagine the philosophically deep thought that Arwen has when he looks at his pair of pants and sees that there's 2 leg holes? But which one do I put my legs in? The right one or the left one? Which way is the front?
I mean, but he is a vulnerable individual who's being exploited, and it's just weird. Like it's kind of strange to consider which ones are the sincere ones, and I think Brian's logic might also be sincere in his belief that he is one of the greatest minds on the face of the planet, and he understands the game better than anybody else. As opposed to being a complete fucking idiot with no grasp of anything. It's just so there's equal. There seems to be an even spread, but it is notable to me that Oakley tends to put his claws. Oakley and Thompson, they tend to identify vulnerable people and hook their claws in and drag them further down the rabbit hole.
Do you think Nathan Thompson's an actual flat earther?
I don't know. He's just seems to be couch surfing his way through life.
Yeah.
He does have a knack for identifying a mark.
He makes decisions that would not normally be made by a Poe, like to go and try to spread the word to children. Because a Poe would never normally say, "How would this validate me more as being a flat earther or not?" And it wouldn't. It doesn't validate you anymore to be a flat earther.
It makes him look like a crazy person.
Yeah, it makes you look like you truly that you're fanatical about your beliefs. And I believe that I used to think he was a Poe. I don't think he's a Poe anymore. I think he's a fanatic.
But he also has that predatory ability to find.
Oh yeah, no, he's a predator. He's a predator for sure.
Nathan Thompson and other flat earthers, to me, they are to academics what Lily Singh and what's it called, family vlogging channels are to comedy. Because like I don't know if you guys know who Lily Singh is and or any family vlogging channels, but they do some really scummy practices. Like for example, there's this one channel that I won't name the channel, but there's this guy that runs it. His name's Austin, and he started what he told his audience, which consists of very young children, like 8 to 12-year-olds. He told them that he's going to do a giveaway where if they apply for the giveaway, they can have a chance to win a $50,000 car. It wasn't a giveaway. It was a raffle. And what that basically meant was, because he has millions of followers, if even a tiny fraction of them apply, he's going to get a massive, profit from it. But he screwed his fans over into thinking he's charitable, and so they'll come back the next time around. But whereas this guy, his audience has the excuse of being young children. Nathan Thompson and these other people, they appeal to adults for whatever reason. And it's these really weird-ass adults that should really know better. And it's why I struggle to find sympathy for them, because they're old enough to know better, but they just don't.
Yeah. And, well, you also then have the type that, like Brian Leakey, who is a legit imbecile. And I say that in the most charitable way possible. Who thinks that he's brilliant, who did an experiment where he went on his roof with a ping pong ball and a golf ball. He dropped them both at what he thought was the same time, and somebody's making noise again.
Not me.
There's music.
Not me.
Now it's gone again. What's going on? I don't know. It sounded like a music box was playing. But so he goes.
Sorry, that was my phone going off in the background.
Heaven was calling Tony.
So you got to watch this video. Go to Brian Leakey's channel. He's on the roof of his house in Florida. I don't know why he's on the roof of this house, because this house looks like it's about to fall down at any moment. He drops a ping pong ball and a golf ball. He doesn't drop them at the same time, even though he says he's going to. And the golf ball hits the ground first. And his conclusion, so this is his think of you're writing a report for, an experiment that you did. His conclusion, once the golf ball hit the ground first, was, "Come on, man."
What?
Yeah. He obviously he's trying to suggest that density is what's determining the rate of fall there, and completely ignoring air resistance or addressing any
go at the same time.
errors. Yeah. And that
everything about that was fucked. Everything.
It wasn't.
This is an egg.
There were no controlled variables. He's on the roof of his shitty house in Florida, and I'm sure his wife was like, "Brian, get down off the roof." But I mean, it was just everything in the world was wrong with it. But if you listen to the guy talk, and he was on Jose's show for just over and over, he literally thinks that he has made a generator that runs off of water by him passing a small voltage through the water, separating out the hydrogen and the gas, and running the hydrogen through the generator, and therefore the generator will run in perpetuity off of a small amount of water. He thinks that he has the plans for that.
So he thinks he's solved perpetual motion.
His engine produces no waste heat at all? Zero?
No. So we all got together one day. It was me and
no friction involved in
his
engine whatsoever.
There was several of us who we were just fucking around with him because he's an idiot, and you can talk to him as if he's an idiot, but in a way that you sound like you're talking nice to him. And we came up with, so the water that he had was in a pickle jar. So I told him that I was proposing a company. We were going to make billions, and we were going to call it Pickle Jar Technologies. And so we were going to mass produce his generators. And I think Big Blue was going to be one of the board members. And I can't remember who else all was on there. Stingray and a couple of other guys. And he was all on board with it. He was like, "Yeah, man, let's do this. Pickle Jar Technologies." He thinks he's a genius, and he's a moron, and he's a flat earther.
What I was going to say before my tablet died on me a couple minutes ago was that it takes, for me to get up to grad school, it's going to take the better part of a decade, and that's just to establish the elementary stuff that everyone uses. And then when we get into actual specific application, like trying to develop quantum computers, that's this very specific field. I'm just looking at the American Mathematical Society page right now. There's over 200 different fields of just math that we might be able to apply at some point in the future. And I'm willing to bet that any PhD mathematician will only be familiar with maybe at most 10 of them. There's so many different fields once you branch off and get into the actual frontline stuff. And these people haven't even done 1 year of elementary. And it's just mind-blowing to me.
They don't understand trigonometry. They don't understand trigonometry.
Bugger that. You just asked them the question I was discussing earlier. You fire a cannonball with velocity v at an angle alpha. What are the upward and horizontal components of its velocity? And you ask flat earthers how would you go about calculating that?
Yeah.
And they can't tell you.
But Jack, you're wasting your time. Get yourself a pickle jar, move down to Florida, hook up with Brian Leakey. You'll be a billionaire.
No, it actually reminds me of a thing I came up with in 6th grade, and it's completely stupid, but I have the excuse of being a 6th grader at the time. I came up with a perpetual motion machine concept where you take a what's called hydrolysis, where you split water into hydrogen and oxygen.
Mm-hmm.
Is it hydrolysis or electrolysis? I can't remember.
Electrolysis.
You take it and you split it, it's electrolysis.
Yeah, it's electrolysis. So you had an electrolysis apparatus hooked up with a hydrogen fuel cell, and then the hydrogen fuel cell takes the hydrogen and oxygen, combines it back into water, and I said you could get infinite energy from this. Now, I, of course, had the benefit of being a 6th grade. I didn't understand that the amount of energy you get out is going to be, most you need that much just to get the
you would need
again. And because of the inefficiency of any man-made system, you're going to need to actually put in more energy. So it's just you would actually put more power into separating the water out than you would get in the hydrogen fuel cell. Yeah, with the process of just taking some energy out of the system to power, say, a light bulb, that would definitely be the case. But I mean, I'm in 6th grade. It's very hard for me to, like, when I first came across flat Earth, I was sitting there going, how do I even address this argument? Because I thought it would be trivial. Conservation of energy and mass is something that was taught to me when I was in 7th grade. How do these guys not know about it?
Because they don't want to. It was my mantra the whole time I was doing the flat Earth debunking, that flat Earthers don't care what's true. I still think that that's the case. The vast majority of them don't care what's true.
Do you guys know about that Austin Witt guy, the guy that was demanding to debate Michael Toon?
Wits it gets it.
Austin? Yeah. So he actually accepted an offer from me to debate him, but he had several conditions. The first was that I watch his debate with Michael and admit that he won. I also need to prove to him that I know what logical fallacy is. And when I asked him, okay, I'm going to be covering some calculus concepts just to, like, because it really helps with the whole explaining the physics thing. How familiar are you with it? And he goes, oh, I'm on the board with Globebusters. I sit with doctors and engineers. I know math and physics. I'm like, what Jesus.
Okay. So if he knows math and physics, then the first thing you need to ask him is to say, okay, well then explain why the sun sets. Just explain why the sun sets. If you know math and physics, throw out physics, okay? Just throw out physics. If you know math. Yeah. If you know, how about this? Throw out any kind of 10th or we'll say 11th and 12th grade math. We'll say 10th grade and before in American schools. Okay. They teach you trigonometry functions, trigonometry functions, whatever. They don't teach you English very well, but they teach you math well enough to know that no matter how fucking far that sun goes from you, it should never go below the horizon, ever. There's never a time when it should go below the horizon. To see how far it should dip down towards the horizon, we would need accurate measurements of where the sun is, actually, like where the subsolar point is, how high the sun is, the exact distance between the observer and the subsolar point. We need all this information. That's fine, but that just determines the lowest point the sun will ever get above the horizon.
Right.
When we physically see the sun dip below the horizon, why? Explain it mathematically.
I've proven that concept before with my debate with Glenn on Michael's channel. I said if something starts off above eye level, no matter how far away it gets, it will never dip beneath eye level. And I did that with a limit using some trigonometry, epsilon delta definition of a limit.
Yeah.
I don't think.
Let me say this.
Delta, I just use limits.
Yeah. Let me say this. No flat earther has ever come anywhere close to winning a debate with MC Toon.
No.
Oh yeah.
It's just not a thing.
Well, the way I see it is you have different types of debunkers, right? No one's ever won a debate with Fight the Flat Earth either, right?
I was going to say,
well, I've never seen a flat earther win a debate, but
right, because they come from the position of automatically losing because they're that's just the definition of their position. The realistic definition of their position is that it's not applicable to reality. So therefore they're entering into the debate trying to promote something that's physically impossible. So no flat earther can ever truly win a debate. And they can win a debate in the hearts and minds of the viewers. Like the viewers can say, oh yeah, he dominated that debate. Well, yeah, of course,
Right.
because the other person might be ill prepared, or there might be a personality issue with saying, hey, I'm a little bit shy and I didn't want to get too aggressive during the debate or whatnot. And there's different reasons why a person could lose to the viewer, but from the position that you're coming into the debate, no flat earther could ever win one. Yeah. So the difference is that MC Toon is much more composed. Okay.
Yeah.
And I think it's easier for flat earthers to talk to MC Toon and try to get their points out, but they're still not going to win because MC Toon is going to address all of them. He's just going to do it a lot more politely.
Yeah,
Flat
he's
Earth,
so
on the other hand, is not going to give you that position. He's going, the moment that you say, gravity could be just electromagnetism. Now, MC Toon might let you get that whole statement out and then explain why you think it might be electromagnetism, whereas Fight's going to cut that off at the head with a little bit more aggression. The same with me. Me and him debate very much similar because it's not electromagnetism, and we know it's not electromagnetism.
MC Toon.
I don't need to hear the rest of your dumbass argument to know and to explain to you why I know it's not electromagnetism at work to replace gravity.
But MC Toon, when he debates somebody, at the end of it, they're not going to have the excuse, well, he wouldn't even let me talk. Well, he was just a jerk.
For sure. For sure.
I mean, he checks all the boxes, and he even will say at every debate, he's like, oh, you've never seen this piece of evidence? Well, just go to mctoon.net/whatever. He's already got it. Like, it's
But that's
I send people there. I send people there.
It's where they just ignore evidence.
It's like debating a very polite Terminator.
Yeah, it's he's an extraordinarily capable debater, but there are there's all sorts of debunkers, and that's as it should be, because there are. One of the things I think that Crafty Keeler has explained very well is that there are a variety of techniques for reaching out to an audience. It's the audience in these debates that's the most important element, and we want to persuade but also inform them about what's going on. And different audience members respond better to different stimuli, to different presentation techniques. And so, MC Toon is really, really good. But I find it frustrating when people are allowed to spout just meretricious nonsense without being opposed. And so I favour a more confrontational style with somebody who is just presenting absolute bullshit.
Schrodinger is soft as a kitty cat, so he would prefer the MC Toon polite way of doing things, like lay your head on a pillow full of fluffies and make sure you don't hurt yourself on the way down. Not me. I'm face palming the shit out of them. I'm taking them down to the ground, bulldog style, 1990s wrestling. That's what we're doing, and that's how we're getting there.
I don't know how I would be classified from the debates that I've had.
No, you're
I
actually
try to be.
No, Schrodinger. I've watched a few of your debates. Let me tell you, you're more of a fight the flat Earth style debater than you are of an MC Toon, and that might be why you like MC Toon's style. Is because I like MC Toon style because I'm an aggressive debater. So for me, it's a complete change. It's a way that I don't do things that's just as effective as the way I do them. So I'm always intrigued by the way that people like Toon and several other people can maintain their composure even when they're being so, like, you can obviously tell that what the person's saying is so adamantly wrong. For someone like me, I would stop them and go, no, fuck that. You're wrong right here, and this is why. He gives them more of a chance to speak. I appreciate that way of doing it because it's the polar opposite of the way I do it.
Yeah, I've never really tried to classify myself. I've never thought about it really until probably just now. I don't know.
Well, I classified you just a second ago. Soft, fluffy, kitty pillows.
I start my debates with flat earthers on Michael's channel. Like I start off trying to be calm, but usually by the end I'm worn down and I'm getting irritated. Because
the only problem that you have, Jack, is that you start out 10 miles over their head. I mean, from the very beginning.
Nah, fuck that, Jack. You stay 10 miles over there. That's their fault that they're on a third grade fucking reading.
Yeah,
and
no,
education
I
level,
think it's great. I love it. I've watched it and I'm just like, he totally just lost him. They're out.
This is one guy who couldn't understand that if you go 360 degrees in a circle, you end up on the same point. And at that point, I couldn't keep my composure anymore. I had to like start to be a little condescending prick, but I just couldn't help it.
Yeah.
No, so I was tired of them saying, "Show me your evidence for gravity," and then when you show them your evidence for gravity, they say, "Well, you know, there's no such thing as gravity because Newton says so, or because Einstein says so." So the last time I was the last time I was in a debate, they were like, "What's your evidence for gravity?" And I was like, "Fucking gravitational redshifted photons leaving the surface of the Earth."
Yeah,
like okay, are we going to go that route? Okay, that's what I'm going to present then. Debunk it, please.
No, what drives me insane is when they say, "Oh, you give them a research paper," like, "Oh, it's a piece of paper. It's just some drawing, an illustration." I'm sitting there going, "Do you expect me to video record?" Because I don't know what Tony's experience is with doing labs. I don't know what Team Skeptic and Schrodingers Cat experience with radar mechanics is. But when I'm doing a lab in my field, I'm calibrating a machine for an hour and then pressing a button every 5 minutes and recording a number on a spreadsheet. Do you really want me to record that for 5 hours? Yeah. That's not an entertaining video.
Yeah, I know that Team and myself are very well acquainted with radar, just from our military days.
Yeah. So, 20 gigabyte video for nothing, basically.
Yeah. That's right, and you'd be, you know, all of which costs money, right? You know, so one of MC Toon's pieces of evidence is the liquid helium filled torus with the diaphragm in it that detects, you know, and from the motion of the liquid helium through the diaphragm, you can detect the rotation of the Earth. You know, any motion of the fluid of the liquid helium inside the torus can only be caused by motion of the torus. You know, you detect motion, therefore it must be moving from the rate of movement and the character of the movement. You can work out the rotation. Okay. And he presented this to Hip Hop Hippie, and Hip Hop Hippie said, well, that's just a diagram. You know, where's the actual footage? Why isn't this done? Well, you'd be surprised how little scientists are interested in convincing people who think the Earth is flat that it isn't.
They don't care.
They have a limited amount of research funding, and they're not going to dedicate it to dragging your sorry ass into the 21st century.
And there's another argument to be made that, like, they want to see a visual demonstration of it. And if, let's say, you videotaped yourself doing the whole project, they would be like, no. I want to see visually see the hydrogen moving on the inside of the container or the night. I'm not sure what component it was, but I want to see that actually moving. And you're like, but hold on, even the scientist isn't watching that move. He's taking readings from a machine that's very sensitive to those things and can like take the readings and make the calculations for you. And they're just getting the final product and plotting the final product and evaluating the data. That's how science works. It has nothing with actually seeing gravitational waves with your own eyes or feeling gravitational waves move through your hands.
Yeah,
it's about
Gizmo did that to FTFE when he showed the inside of the reactor with the high pressure and low pressure inside the vacuum chamber. He was like, well, I don't all I see is a light. He didn't care what if it was evidence. He just wanted to continue to argue.
Even so, he started shooting himself in the foot with his counter there by saying that forces can cause order in gases. Well, that's our position. One of those forces being gravity. Robert Kaslov asks, "Did MC Toon have that device?" No, that's a very expensive scientific device. He had a paper on it. It's on his website. Boole is saying in the chat that his microphone is broken.
Ah, shit.
That sucks.
That was the that we heard.
Okay. Apparently it took him a while to realize that we weren't deliberately being dicks to him by just talking
That's
over
an
him.
assumption. Yeah, that's an assumption there, Bullianator.
Nah, we can
careful
hear
with
you the whole
assumptions.
time just fine, dude. Oh, that's funny. Shit, what was I about to say? I totally lost it.
It's pretty tedious. It's just just a few videos at the moment. I'm going to put another one on about gas pressure and what it is, because it turns out that flat earthers don't understand. Well,
hold on. Are we going to make sure to include that gas pressure cannot exist without the firmament container over the Earth, please? If you're not going to accept that, then you're not doing science, Tony.
Can
you know this by now?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah,
Good.
we hear you.
Good. Okay. So that little refresh fixed it. Meats is just everything tonight for some reason. I don't know what it is. I just don't know what like. Did the Flurfs have a full moon or something? I don't get it.
It's all the Pornhub tabs that I have open.
All right.
It must be. Yeah, I was just saying, like, this fight. I've noticed the way these people debate from the time I first met them, and they all have very different styles. Even yours and Fight's team are totally like it's like good cop, bad cop with you two. It really is. With obviously Fight being the bad cop, because Fight just
for the longest time, yeah, people were saying that I was the dickhead and that he was being the nice guy. I think it's just per however it rolls out, but you're right. We do the good cop, bad cop role, and it's natural we don't select that ahead of time.
When Brian Leakey was on your channel most recently, you were the bad cop.
That's true. That's true.
You pissed him off and went for him. But anyway, go on, Bull.
No worries.
Me? Wait, me?
Yeah, you.
Yeah.
When did I do that?
Brian Leakey, you don't. You're messing with me, right?
No, he was on my channel?
No, he was on FTFEs, and he was there discussing it with. He was there for a debate with FTFE, and you said, you adopted the a background role, and then the two of you sort of managed to strike some sparks off one another, and
I think I remember that too. If you went off on him.
And you got more and more agitated, and he was there going, "I'm a man. I don't have to put up with this.
Yes.
I'm a man."
Yes.
And it was quite weird because it's one of the few recent debates where you've reacted a bit more vigorously than Fight the Flat Earth.
Yeah, I've become quite complacent, and I don't think it's intentional. I just think that it's more like I think that I try to see the value in the audience, what the audience is trying to see, and I don't think they want to see the flat earther leave immediately. And so I try to hold that off and build it up throughout the thing, just to keep them around as long as possible, because I'm starting to notice a lot of these flat earthers will just leave. They'll just leave if they're feeling threatened or that's not what I want.
That started on Saturday Night Fights too. That was like that's been going on a long time with you too. It's great. I love it. But MC Toon, like there's the fire and brimstone preachers, and then there's like the atheists that are kind of like that. Like you got Mount Dillahunty and R and Raw, right? They go out and they're like, "You're stupid. You're an idiot for believing in God. This, that, and the other." And then you got MC Toon, who's more like Anthony Magnabosco, right? Does that street epistemology kind of thing with the flat earther.
Oh yeah, I know that dude. Yeah.
He does. He's
Sort of
more,
like he slides the dagger in really slow.
right. He's like he really wants to know why the hell they think the way they think, right? So that's MC Toon, and you're more like Steve McRae, Schrodinger. You have your limits. You have your limits.
yeah.
You're willing to talk. You're willing to talk. You're willing to have the discussion, but enough is enough
I've
at
never
some
started
point.
off hot.
That's
I don't
really a
think I've
good
ever-
way of explaining it. Go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Schrodinger.
I don't think I've ever started out like hot on one of mine. My favorite debate of all time was my very first one on, which was on non-sec, because I had done so much research on this guy, and I had so many traps laid, and he walked into every one of them. Like when I asked him if he thought that it was okay to use violence to spread the flat Earth truth, and he said, absolutely not. And I was like, really? Because on this date, you said that you wanted to take over this place and kill all the people. And like, I had the actual quotes. And he was like, oh, yeah, I did say that.
Yeah,
that was Flat Earth Fokker, by the way.
Okay.
Oh yeah.
I actually had a question
guy.
while I've got some physicists here, because you just brought up recently, it was a little while ago, my video about pressure, gas pressure / air pressure. There has been a tendency in discussions on this to distinguish between gas pressure and atmospheric pressure. And I am at a loss to explain why people think there's a difference. If I introduce a pressure sensor into a gas, that pressure sensor, all that pressure sensor measures is the force that is applied to it, divides it by the area, and works out the pressure, right? However it does it, that's what it's doing. It doesn't care if it's in a container. It doesn't care if it's in the atmosphere. All it cares about is the force that is being applied to the sensor.
So
now
Tony, the way I would explain that is to say, that gas pressure is like the encompassing description of what is going on. Atmospheric pressure is the gas pressure that's generated by the dynamics of the atmosphere.
Right. Okay. And that's but the origin of the pressure, in a container, for instance, it's the reaction force against the boundaries of the container.
Right.
It's the containers are a very convenient way to either introduce more material, change the temperature of the gas inside, or if the geometry of the container is variable, you can reduce or increase the volume and change the pressure that way. So, but a reaction force is just a class of force. We can create gas. We can create gas pressure using other forces, such as electromagnetic force, as in the case in the tokamak, or gravitational force.
Right.
Right.
They just don't seem to understand that the gas pressure reading, the measurement, is actually force over area. Like, it's pounds per square inch, which it's all about the kinetic energy in that gas. It has nothing to do with the container at all, and they don't seem to grasp that subtlety.
So when the molecules of gas bounce off of the container, the molecules that make up the container don't continue to move. They, like you said, they have a reactionary force. They push back because there's just nowhere for them to go. Whereas the atmosphere is a little bit different. You think of it like this: if you could magically remove a layer of atmosphere all the way around the Earth, right? Then when you remove that layer, air would rush in because there's no boundary there. So the actual layers of the atmosphere, each individual atom or molecule acts as its own container of what's beneath it. Because whatever's beneath it is going to try, because of the kinetic energy, it's going to try to continue up into that open area where there is nothing to to impede its movement, like other molecules of gas. Excuse me, my phone randomly gives me all my messages at one time. So, but that's why, like, it's not really different. It's just, it is different, but it's not really different. The atmospheric pressure really is gas pressure. The container are the molecules of atmosphere around whatever you're trying to measure. I mean, if there were no molecules there, then the volume of the gas would expand into that area, and it would expand because as the molecules are going to hit up against something that would normally be there, there's now nothing there. So they just continue on until they reach that next wall of atmosphere where they start bouncing off. And of course, that wall would be coming in as well. You know what I'm saying? I'm trying to make it hypothetical, as if the atmosphere is solid around the dynamic volume that we're looking in. Simply by removing the wall causes the volume to expand.
Yeah, the difference that I see it is that the atmospheric pressure, and the way that I first learned this was in physics class, as a matter of fact. If you're, say, at the bottom of a swimming pool, then the water pressure that you feel is a column straight up from you to the surface. Yep. And that's exactly what the atmospheric pressure is a column from you up. Yeah. Whereas gas pressure in a container is ubiquitous on all sides.
Well, and this is something that I would dispute slightly. I think that gas pressure does vary inside a container.
Tony, be careful saying that. People will roast you. They roasted me for saying that. I said the same thing. They said I was wrong. I'm like, no, I'm not wrong. But okay, well, no, leave that to you guys. There's still a gravitational gradient. Okay,
right.
Even inside a container. And
if you're too pedantic, though, then you're going to get in trouble with people who aren't pedantic.
Right, yeah. Right. You're bringing up something that's quite very minor. Everybody's phones tonight, Jesus. That was mine. Sorry. You're gonna get into this like, okay, so it's yes, there's a gradient inside the container. There's a gradient everywhere on the planet. Yeah. Because there's gravity everywhere on the planet, but it's the difference between the top of a 5-gallon propane container or natural gas container and the bottom of a natural gas container is it's almost immeasurable.
Yeah, I've told people this before. Exactly. I used to deal with pressurized oxygen containers for the business I was running, and never once did my oxygen container run out and I could flip it upside down and get more oxygen out of it. At the height of a container, a 3-6 foot container, you're not going to have a true differential. Like that's looking at something that's so insignificant that you're not going to truly notice it. But if the container itself was 100, 100 miles or 100 kilometers, let's say, tall, then at the top of the container, there would be no gas. There would be no gas. Where at the bottom of the container, there would be gas.
Exactly, and it's and this is one of the things. An effect can exist, but be so small that it falls below your observational accuracy.
It's imperceptible.
You can no longer detect it with the instruments available to you. And there seems to be a concept that is lost on flat earthers. They don't seem to understand that there is a limit to the accuracy with which some observations can be made. Daniel Pratt with his famous Olympic swimming pool curvature.
Oh God, that guy.
Yeah, and
he doesn't even understand what he would be measuring. That's the entire hilarious part, is that they say, what would be the drop on the end of the swimming pool? What the fuck does that doesn't even make sense. Like that question in itself is completely nonsensical.
Yeah.
So is for a gas to be present. And the only thing that really affects it is temperature, like the basic velocity of the gas molecules, the number of gas molecules, and that's really it.
Yeah,
you don't need a container.
Yes, you don't need a container, and the pressure sensors, the pressure sensor. Well, a pressure sensor cannot determine whether or not it's in a container or whether or not it's outside of a container.
Now,
all it measures is the force applied to it.
is that water pressure, like you say, is more like having to do with the weight of the water above you, whereas air pressure is a little different. It's more just about the number of air molecules around you and the temperature of the gas. Air pressure decreases with altitude, not so much because there's less weight of gas above you, but more because it's just less gas molecules as you get higher in altitude.
Well,
Lower kinetic energy.
I'm going to say that that's incorrect. The climate physics textbooks that you get into definitely model Earth's atmosphere as a hydrostatic fluid in its equilibrium state. There are small scale deviations from that, but it is the pressure gradient that you see in the atmosphere definitely results from I've forgotten what the name of the term is, but it is the weight of the material that's above you that's applying pressure at every height. It's by solving that it all drops out to an individual differential equation where you get an exponential drop off with height.
About the Boltzmann equation?
No, not the Boltzmann.
Not the Boltzmann. No, what is it? I thought it had something to do. Boltzmann had something to do with that. With the equation describing the pressure gradient of the Earth.
I'm pretty sure it's
who?
It's not a who, it's more just a what, like the barometric equation. It's exponential.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Tony, I heard your debate on climate change, and you really just don't have any credibility after that. You got owned so bad.
Oh, do not make me come over there and kick you in the nuts, mate.
I mean that absolutely tongue in cheek. Oh God.
Yeah, that's actually why I remember I was going to ask Tony about his channel because I wanted to do something where I collaborate with him, just talking about climate change denialism, because I am just sick of flat Earth at this point. I need a change of topic.
No, absolutely, that'd be great. So I've done the one presentation on climate change, and I am looking to do some more because this is actually how I ended up in this community, was by wandering around YouTube and picking fights with climate denialists.
Going to bring you to flat earthers.
And eventually, I discovered that they're, sort of, and I thought, these people are so arrogant and scientifically illiterate. How do they not, how do they imagine they know enough to have a meaningful opinion on this? It's baffling to me. And then I came across the flat earthers, and I've gone, holy crap! There are so many.
Even worse.
There is so much ignorance that needs to be dispelled here, and doing it in one-on-one discussions just isn't going to cut it. It needs to be one person educating, or one or more people educating lots of people in order to get traction here. So yeah, it changed. Discovering the flat Earth changed my approach. So yeah.
Yeah, I just wait till you've done it for a few years. You're gonna be like, these fucking people will never learn.
No, they're never going to learn, and I think that's an important realization. Is that we're only here to educate the audience.
I was really naive when I started. I really was. I don't know if you were team. I really thought I'm going to fix this.
Well, I didn't actually take that approach to it. The first approach I had was revenge, of course, for being kicked out of Nathan Thompson's Facebook group.
That's right.
I thought, you can't kick me off of YouTube, bitches. So I'm going to go make a YouTube channel and explain why the fuck you dipsticks are wrong. And that's where it started. But I do think that for any new YouTuber, anybody that's coming to the platform and wanting to make videos, that flat Earth is a great place to start. Flat Earth is so obviously wrong, and it's so easy to find what style you're really good at. And I think that's where I've what's helped me best is getting the start in flat Earth, doing flat Earth stuff, to the point that, you know, that I moved on from flat Earth, that I'm actually finding other topics, but those topics, I'm using the same exact approach I used to what worked for me in flat Earth.
Well,
so
yeah,
I think that really keeps people around.
You learn your voice. You learn how to talk on the microphone without being without being nervous. You learn your own cadence, your own style of debunking, your own method for creating videos, all that stuff.
You know what's funny is that
go ahead. I was going to say, you've always been good at debate. Period. Like, I remember how I met you. Like, wasn't even a flat Earth debate. It was debate roulette, and you were debating. I think it was Jeremy Sislow
about torture, whether torture is effective.
Right, whether torture is effective. Right. I remember that, and you took the pro. Yes, it is effective.
Pro torture.
Pro torture. Team Skeptic. But no,
it is effective.
It is effective. You did a good job of saying it was effective. It doesn't mean it's moral. Let's put that out there. He wasn't trying to argue it was moral and it was a good thing. He was saying it's effective. It does get information.
There are two caveats to that. One, it gets you information provided the subject of your interrogation has information. If your subject does not have any information, they will tell you whatever they think you want to hear in order to get you to stop hurting them.
Yeah, but American intelligence is pretty goddamn good when it comes to identifying people that are valuable targets. I'm not saying they're perfect. They're not perfect, but they are good. So the chances of them being wrong are small.
Yeah, the points of there were points during the occupation of Iraq, for instance, where American intelligence services offered rewards for information on at that point, people shopped in innocent people in return for the money. So there have been some cases where it does go off the rails, and it does need to be. It needs to be. And if you've got access to the person for some time, there are more effective ways to get information out of them.
Absolutely. So here's
and more ethical.
Yeah, and I can speak to this with some basis for my knowledge. If you're absolutely right, if you've got months and months, then you're going to sit down with this dude and play Xbox with him and slowly pull the thread and get something out of him. If you're going for what would colloquially be called torture, you have to know part of the truth to be able to ask a question and be able to assess, is that answer true, based on something that you already know to be fact. In those circumstances, torture is effective.
Okay. But we've strayed a little bit. This was how
we have. we're way off topic.
Oh, fuck that. Let's talk about torture. No, I'm just kidding.
One of my favorite quotes from my childhood comes from Get Smart.
I love that show.
The old spy comedy show with Don Adams, and they get captured by the bad guys, and one of the bad guys says, so now we torture them, right? He goes, no, torture's barbaric. We're going to use, we've got these other techniques. And the thug goes, what? No torture? This used to be such a fun outfit. And at the end of the episode, the thug gets irate and shoots the head of the group and says, maybe next time I ask for some torture, we get some action. Anyway, so those are the quotes that live with me.
Yeah, I met a guy once who was an interrogator, and for the people that they do have long-term, the people that are prisoners, and they're going to be prisoners, they actually will befriend them and play Xbox with them and bring them cigarettes and do all those things. And they'll just very slowly bring up a topic, little by little by little, And they'll tell you that that is the most effective way if you've got a nearly infinite amount of time. You know,
Yeah.
if you're trying,
But
if you're trying to get
question-
something out of them that's not time sensitive.
The question for the debate was not, is there a
Is it
more
ethical?
effective way
Right.
of doing it?
Yeah, is it effective?
Is it effective?
And it is. Absolutely,
effective.
hands down, it's effective. Anybody who's been to Sears School in the military knows that it's effective.
Okay, but we're here discussing science, goddammit.
The science of torture.
Torture.
Actually, I thought we were talking about Schrodinger's cat, but whatever.
Yeah.
No, but one thing I learned is that, you know, you did point it out right, Schrodinger, when you said that, you know, I went through all the beginnings of learning how my voice sounds, and you know, my delivery on my videos is different than my delivery when I'm in a debate or when I'm just talking like this. It's very cadence driven, you know, because I want to drive home certain points. And I think that works for me. You know, I think that works for me in the long run, is to find find ways of emphasizing, of speaking, like being in, God damn it, I called you an explorator the other day. An orator, is that correct? As someone who speaks?
Yeah.
An
Yeah,
orator.
orator.
Yes, I got that one right. Oh, it's not an orator, guys. It's an orator.
Yeah, orator.
But I've learned to become more of somebody who speaks when I do my videos, and someone like speaks with like as an orator. And then when I do my debates, I want to come at a more personal level. You know, even if it's like something that when I'm like, yeah, you're a fucking idiot, I want them to understand that if we were sitting there person to person, I'd be calling them an idiot too. And I'd be calling them in this tone of voice. And, you know, I try to be very conversational when I do debates.
Yeah. But which gets back to an earlier point. I think there are so many, you know, there are so many valid ways to communicate with and educate people, yeah, I think also that you know, in the not too distant future, I don't think that flat Earth will exist as a significant force on YouTube. And so what I'm hoping for is that these people with these platforms will be able to transition to other topics to talk about.
Yeah.
That's funny though, Tony, is because go ahead, Jack. I'll let you talk first, and then I'll answer that.
Yeah. At the very end of this month, I'm planning a debate with a guy who thinks Wi-Fi is harmful to people based on the electromagnetic radiation. And it's going to be a very different style of debate for me and for Michael, because whereas before we're just talking with idiots, Sky actually has scientific papers to back his claim. And so we're going to be actually exchanging papers and debating the merits of the research that's actually been done. So I'm just very excited for that because I could really use a big refresher right now.
Yeah, and that's a good refresher to go to. The 5G conspirators are actually like pretty popular on YouTube and amongst our audience. Our audience likes anything that can be empirically shown to be wrong. So, you know, even my Karen videos, and there's reasons why I pick the ones I pick. I don't just pick any one that I think is going to be entertaining. It has to also be filled with false information, because that's the type of person that I am. I'm not just someone here to point out how stupid you are. I'm here to point out how stupid you are and explain why you're stupid. So you have to make a claim that's stupid before I'm going to just go in there and make fun of you. Like I found some video of some lady, you know, freaking out because she parked her car weird and the guy who parked his car normal was a little close to her car, so she is freaking out on him. Now, yes, that would be a really interesting and entertaining video to do, but she doesn't really make any false claims. She's just being stupid. And there's no reason for that. Like, my audience wouldn't enjoy that. My audience enjoys when people make a claim that I can show why it's stupid and then call them an idiot for doing it. 5G is one of those claims that have like empirical arguments to back them up on either side, whatever side you want to talk about. One of the reasons why flat Earth is so popular, there's empirical arguments that even when flat earthers make arguments, there's an empirical way of showing how that argument is incorrect. And that's what the audience loves. The audience loves seeing us make those debunks and then watching the extreme denialism that occurs immediately following, the ad hoc rush to explanation.
Yeah. Right. I've got to thank you for your one video because I've been able to bring this up in several different arguments. You made the one video where you wore the mask and the O2 sat detector, or the O2 sat monitor.
Pulse oximeter.
Same thing. Pulse oximeter, O2 sat. Your O2 blood saturation. So a couple different times I've been able to say, no, go watch this video. There's this dude that does, he sits there, what was it, 2 hours wearing a mask.
Hour and 40 minutes, Hour and 40 minutes straight.
And he's checking his O2 sat, and it never changes. And, because all the people say, oh, you're depriving yourself of oxygen. You're absolutely not. And that's a real-time demonstration of it. So that was good shit that I get to point to.
They said people said I was trying to virtue signal by doing that. I was like, no, virtue signaling would be wearing it throughout the video while I'm telling you. I'm not. I did my whole video. While I did it with a mask on, I did it to show a specific. If I did it on every video for no reason at all, just to show that I wear the mask, that'd be virtue signaling.
It would be virtue signaling if you didn't have the monitor along with it.
Yeah, exactly. Like I had a reason for having it on to debunk the claim that wearing a mask depletes your oxygen levels. Because my dad made the same claim. Like I was out fishing with my dad, and he's like, he asked me how YouTube was going. I was like, oh, I kind of moved on from flat Earth. I still cover flat Earth. I'll still cover a video if it comes out. But I also, I moved on from flat Earth. I've started to cover Karens. He's like, what are Karens? And I'm like, Dad, before I tell you this, you're a Karen, okay? Let me just tell you that right now. You're a Karen, but I mean no offense, okay? It's one of those people who think that science is wrong, and they stand up and they say, my rights are being violated because science is lying to you. And he's like, but they are. And I'm like, see, that's what I'm saying, Dad. You're a Karen, and don't take offense to what I'm about to say, but no, it doesn't. And he was like, I promise you, I wear a mask, and when I wear a mask, I get lightheaded. And I'm like, that is in your mind.
It's called psychosomatic reaction.
It is absolutely 100% all in your head. He's like, no, I probably. And I was like, Dad, I wore a mask for an hour and 40 minutes, taking a reading every 15 to 20 minutes of my oxygen levels using a pulse oximeter, which they use at a doctor's office. Okay. I didn't drop at all. I dropped like 1%, and then it went up and then down and then down and then up and then up. And I finished at the same level that I started at. And I videotaped myself doing this just so there was a documented proof of it, so that somebody can say, yeah, that's just you saying that. I filmed myself doing it.
Here's the thing about that. Your pulse oximetry in your blood gas saturation changes all the time because you're respirating, you're breathing, you're expending energy, your metabolism is running, sometimes you're resting, sometimes you're exercising. It changes constantly. That could have happened whether you were wearing the mask or not. And it wasn't even to the point where it would be dangerous. Like those numbers, those are normal numbers.
Yeah. I think I started out at 98 and dropped to 96. And then when I finished, I either finished on 97 or I finished on 98. But like I did the whole thing without any issues whatsoever. I didn't have to struggle. Yeah, I had to readjust my mask because I was doing a video and I was talking and I was being very animated about things, so my mask would slip and I would have to constantly adjust it. But I never pulled it off my face, not one single time. I did the entire video. Like they don't have an argument to that. And that is how like an actual observation should be made. You shouldn't just say, oh, well, I made observations on Facebook. I watched a video of a guy who showed his oxygen levels dropping to 10%. You're like, what? 10? He's dead. That man's dead.
Yeah, you're absolutely dead at that point.
I will say, the first time I put on a mask, it's not actually entirely comfortable, right? Initially, because it's just something I wasn't used to. But you give it like 10 minutes, and that goes away, right? It's just there then. When you first put on a mask, having not worn a mask, I found it a little uncomfortable. I was very mindful of it, and there were points where I was breathing where it would sort of the fabric would stick to my mouth a little bit. But you get used to it. And then it's just you carry on without any problems whatsoever.
The only thing that really annoys me about it to this day is I live in Florida and my glasses fog up when I go outside. If I'm wearing it.
Yeah, that is true, but quite and that is annoying. But that's got nothing to do with your oxygen levels, right?
It's just annoying. It's just annoying.
Yeah.
It's something I can put up with, and I can take the mask off when I go outside, so it doesn't even last that long. And going inside, I'm in air conditioning everywhere, so there's no moisture in the air anywhere where there's air conditioning here because it's always running.
Yeah, but I forget who it was. Was it you, team, who said that this, wearing a mask is the least you can do?
Yeah, it's the least you can do.
To care for somebody, to care for the health and well-being of other people, it can be mildly inconvenient. It can be mildly uncomfortable. That I don't mind. And it's not compulsory.
As somebody who's probably the most outspoken about wearing masks because of the videos I do, let me tell you, even when I put on a mask, I don't enjoy the face covering. I really don't. It doesn't smell good after about 10 to 15 minutes. You're literally breathing in your own breath. I mean, you smell your own breath. I mean, it's no doubt about that. At the same time, it can be, a little irritating around the back of the ears at times if you're having to adjust it a lot. I mean, there's lots of reasons to say this is an inconvenience, but you know what? My right to not be inconvenienced by that stuff does not trump your right to be healthy, no matter how special I think that I am. So the least that one person can do is wear a mask. Just put on a mask for other people. Yep. You're not killing yourself. You're not hurting yourself. And even if it turns out that people were just exaggerating all this, people in other countries do this regularly. When they don't feel good, they wear a mask. That's why. I'm sorry.
I'm from one of those countries. Like I at a young age, when I got sick, I would wear a mask around my family. Just heading out to.
It's courteous. It's courteous.
Mm-hmm.
And we in America just think that we're special, and that I'm one of the biggest people that have American pride and Texan pride. Being from Texas, anybody here from America would understand what I mean when I say I'm from Texas. I got a lot of Texas pride. I'm very disappointed in my fellow Texans. I'm very disappointed in my fellow Americans who can't see the value in looking out for your neighbor. And that's what you're doing, is you're looking out for your fucking neighbor.
Right. It's first world problems. It's like
it is big time.
You mean I got to do something extra? I can't be bothered with that.
I just feel like I want to lift the tone a little bit. So I'm going to point out that in the side chat, you need to scroll back a little bit, but Jessica has produced some fan art. And if My Little Pony is something you have fond childhood memories of, prepare to be traumatized. If we're lucky, Jessica G might share the link again. But it's spectacular. That's all I can say.
But that's why I say, when I talk with people about this, and especially when people will say, when are things going to go back to normal? Well, let me explain to you. You need to clear your head of what you think normal is, okay? Because this is no longer going, like, this wasn't something that, like, we've been dodging, like, severely dodging a bullet with our population density and our, you know, inability to wear masks or to voluntarily wear masks before this happened. It took a worldwide event, you know, in a time when people could share information across, you know, the internet rapidly. It took that to become self-aware of this problem. And this is not something that Americans are becoming self-aware of. It's something that the globe, the entire world, is becoming self-aware of what a pandemic, what a virus can do to this world. Now, we can even go forth and say this is a relatively mild virus. This isn't one that just kills you at a rate of 25% of the people it infects. You know, now that we've seen something that's more intense than the flu, but less intense as something such as, you know, bubonic plague. Now we're preparing ourselves in case something like bubonic plague will happen again, because it will absolutely happen one day. Okay. This is not saying that it's not possible, or we should be fearing it all our lives. No, that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is just like an asteroid hitting the Earth, it's going to happen again at some point in time in the future. We should be prepared for it, and this is what this virus is doing, is making us more aware of this. So normalcy at the workplace is no longer going to be your supervisor telling you, are you really sick though? Come on in. Don't you think you can make it, can't you? Don't you think so? Yeah, no, that's not going to happen anymore. I think you're going to see go ahead.
Oh, no, well, you can finish your sentence. And then
I was just going to say, I think you're going to see a lot of businesses moving more towards when an employee can work from home, they should work from home. You know, like my son can do everything he can do at his job's campus site. He can do everything there that he can do here. The only difference is they have to pay for the building over there. That's additional air conditioning they have to pay for. That's so many different things that they have to do just to force him to go to that workplace to do what he could do from home. And I think this virus is going to open us up to realizing the value in working from home.
Call centers, call centers are a thing of the past, folks. They're gone.
Yeah. So last week, and well, before I say that, I did see the My Little Tony, and so she made you the pink pony, so that's adorable. Well done. So
I like how all the other ponies are just looking like that. What is that deformed thing doing near us?
Yeah.
Anyway,
I'll never be a brony.
So right now I'm in New Hampshire working on the USS Virginia, and so our standard operating procedure every morning is we go in, and before you go on board, because you cannot social distance on a submarine, you just can't. So you know, we have to wear the masks all day on board and all that, and but we got our temperature taken. So last week we all get there in the morning, and for some reason my temperature is 100.5. So wait a few minutes, it's 100.8. Wait a few minutes, it's 100.3. So all of a sudden, everything stops. So myself and everybody that I worked with in, you know, the same room or the same, well, on a ship we would call it a space. Myself and everybody who was in my vicinity the day before, all of us get sent back to our hotel rooms. And the people who, myself and the people who were closest around me, all of us have to find a place to go get tested. And none of us could come back to work till we all tested negative, which we all did. It was just sort of a fluke. I just had a little bit of a higher temperature that day. But that's the new normal, at least for the foreseeable future. Especially if you're going to be working on something like a submarine.
Now, eventually, though, we'll get to a point where that isn't a requirement for daily work. You know,
right.
Now we're simply in the middle of the pandemic, and that's what a lot of these anti-maskers don't understand. Like, we
isn't
are
forever.
we can't
Yeah.
yeah, it's not forever, but we're also, you know, turning our wheels in mud right now because we have so many people that for every step we take forward, they pull us back a step. You know, the anti-maskers are like that. Say, okay, we can get control of this pandemic in this way, and then you have all these anti-maskers who go, nope, I'm just going to go out and do it. They're having fucking TikTok anti-mask COVID parties right now, guys.
Oh,
I mean,
it's
these
insane.
kids are spreading this shit because they just don't fucking care.
Right.
They don't.
But what if they didn't send us all home and I did have it? That entire submarine would contract it. Everybody.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
and what I think is important, and I think Tony might be able to appreciate this as someone who looks at atmospheric science, is that one of the reasons the coronavirus is just such a big problem is because it's, as far as its death rate is concerned, it's so low. If you were to compare the coronavirus with, say, the bubonic plague and have them have an outbreak today, let's just say that the pandemic so far didn't start, and it start today, the coronavirus will overall kill more people because even though the bubonic plague has a higher death rate, it kills them so fast they can't spread them. So they can't spread the disease very far, whereas the coronavirus can. And just like climate, it's so slow acting that in the moment you will never be able to really notice its effects, and you just sort of put it off and you diminish its significance until it's really late.
Well, that and the onset of symptoms too. Like the onset of symptoms of the bubonic plague is boom. Like you get it a couple hours later, you're practically dying, right? But with COVID, it could be a couple weeks. You may never be symptoms. You may be asymptomatic the whole time your body's fighting the coronavirus.
And what I think is also important is that sometimes, because scientists are used to speaking to other scientists, the way they produce information isn't clear to laymen. But when a lot of people, they don't get something, they should ask questions rather than make ridiculous claims. Because when the WHO, they came out and said that asymptomatic cases, in other words, people who will never have symptoms, are very unlikely to transmit the disease. And everyone was saying, wait a minute, you said people who aren't showing symptoms are more likely to. So why are you changing your mind? But what they really missed out on was that it's just a terminology of pre-symptomatic people, people who are about to get symptoms but haven't yet. They are at the peak of transmittability. But because people don't understand the difference between pre-symptomatic and asymptomatic, they just go right away and go right off into the rabbit hole, so to speak, instead of just clarifying what the terminology means.
Yeah. I think that you make excellent points, and you both do. I was about to make the same point about asymptomatic carriers, but you know, the efficiency with which if you're a disease really needs to remain asymptomatic for somebody long enough for somebody to complete a long plane journey in order to really take off in the modern setting. So a person can catch the disease in one area and then fly it to another area, and without the opportunity to exhibit symptoms in the meantime, it's very difficult to contain that. It's very difficult to erect barriers. You've basically got to go back to quarantine. One of the reasons Australia doesn't have rabies. It's one of the diseases that we don't really have here. I don't think we have bubonic plague either. And one of the reasons is that back in the age of sail, livestock and humans took so long to get here that a lot of the noxious diseases they were carrying killed them before they got the chance. How
convenient.
So it worked out really well for us. Not so much.
Do y'all let me ask you a question. Do y'all do animal quarantines there?
Yes,
like
we do.
If, let's say, okay, so you do, and that's one thing that I'm really, when I first heard of Hawaii doing it, right, I thought to myself, God, that's such a fucking dumbass thing to do. You know, why would they take my animal? Because I was contemplating moving to Hawaii at one point, a long time ago. And then when I learned about the quarantine, and I was like, this just seems like a hassle. Yeah. And then I realized, they don't have rabies on their fucking island, and that's how they keep it off, is they put your animal in quarantine long enough for your animal to die from rabies before it can have an opportunity to transmit it to another animal on the island.
Right now they're doing people quarantine in Hawaii, because I was just there and I had to quarantine the first 14 days I was there.
Yeah.
For the whole, for no matter, no symptoms or anything, right? Like just
No.
every
When you
single
go there,
person.
you have to go. Yeah, you got to go straight to your hotel room or wherever you're at. And they're actually serious about it because about 2 days in, they called me and they said, "So you're at the embassy suites in Waikiki?" And I said, "Yes." And they said, "You're in room, blah blah blah." And I said, "Yes." And I could just tell by the way they were asking me that they already had checked with the hotel, or they were going to check with the hotel right after they called me.
Yeah.
They weren't messing around. There's actually was 2 or 3 people that I had heard on the news while I was there that got arrested for breaking quarantine. They weren't messing around.
No,
Tony,
and neither. Sorry, go on.
Is New Zealand like that as well? Do they quarantine animals? Like
Yes,
it's all those islands down there are all so devoid of rabies from the past that they just and kept the law going. That's awesome, man.
New Zealand's doing really well with COVID also. They pretty much don't have it, right?
Yeah, they had an outbreak, kind of a mysterious one. They're not exactly sure where it came from. Because they should have been clear, but they had a bit of an outbreak. But they've had like a few dozen cases. They've really clamped down on it. Ardern, the Prime Minister there, I can't remember her first name, but she's just awesome.
It's Lisa.
Lisa Ardern, yeah.
I just made that up.
Okay. How nice it is to have leadership that takes the shit seriously from day one, though, right?
Yeah, that's right. And I mean, our politicians futzed around and turned it into a political football. Didn't respond. Then when they decided to respond, they were decisive about it. But it took them a while before they started taking it seriously. I think just wanted to get back to team being spot on earlier. I don't think we're going back to normal. I don't think that's happening.
I mean, if you look through time, the normal of the 1800s is nowhere like the normal of the 1900s. The normal of the 1900s is nothing like the normal of the 2000s. This is our natural progression forward to finding new normalcies, but it's going to be I'm not going to say a polar opposite, but we will not see things the way they were. The 2019 normal is gone. Like even 2020, it's just different. You're going to be able to look at videotape. Let's say I was to show you a videotape from July 2019 at some random park with people playing at it. In July 2020, at some random park with people playing in it. You would be able to look at the two and go, "That one's 2020," because everybody will be wearing masks.
You can just look at a television show now and identify the ones that are pre-2020. Like, that wouldn't happen nowadays. It's really weird. I have to say, I had the weirdest experience because at the beginning of lockdown, I ordered some DVDs, and one of the DVDs that was recommended to me was a show called Utopia, which is a British science fiction show. It's a black comedy, a science fiction-y thing, and it arrived, a couple of weeks ago, and so I just watched it, and the show is about an evil multinational conspiracy set up during the Cold War that is sparking fake virus outbreaks so that they can vaccinate people. and you're just thinking, like, so all of are the COVID are those people who think that the vaccine is fake, are they treating this like it's a documentary? Because
they eat that up
almost beat for beat all of the conspiracy theories. And this show dates from 2013, like it's a 7-year-old show, but beat for beat, it is pretty much identical to the rabid viral conspiracy theories going on around. And you just
you've never seen Mark Sargent go through all the different movies and
Right.
talk about,
Okay.
yeah, and he loves it. And
Oh, okay.
the ones that play the clip of The Simpsons where they're at the baseball field and the guy hits the pop fly that hits the dome and all the water comes rushing in. They love that shit. I'm surprised the conspiracy theory, the COVID people haven't gotten hold of that yet.
Yeah,
It's a good series. It is a good series, but
when we're talking about the new normal, I mean, in the 30s and 40s, you know, washing your hands after you go to the bathroom, that wasn't really the normal like it is today.
That's why I still live in the 30s in my head.
Yeah. Think about
And
pre 9/11 and post 9/11.
Yep.
How stuff that's absolutely normal to us today wasn't normal back then.
Yeah, and here's the other thing. Here's the other thing about that. When the post 9/11 first occurred, right? When TSA really first started changing their policies about, you know, checking in and what a screening is consisting of,
right?
And basically it increased the inconvenience of security check-ins for the average consumer of flight tickets, right? So a person who was flying in a domestic flight would now no longer need to be there 1 hour in advance, but now 2 to 3 hours in advance.
Right.
There was an outrage. Americans were pissed off, and that lasted for years until eventually everybody accepted it. Yep. Now it's an expected inconvenience when flying a plane.
Remember
just
when
like
you would
wearing
take
a mask
somebody,
would be an expected inconvenience. Go ahead.
Remember when you would take somebody to the airport and you would walk to the gate with them?
Oh yeah,
until
you ain't
their
doing
flight
that no
left?
more. No, ain't doing
And
that no more.
nobody anymore even bats an eye at it. Of course you're not going to the gate. So remember when people used to go to the bar and smoke, and you would come home from the bar and your clothes would smell like smoke? Now, if you go to the bar and somebody lights up a cigarette, everybody's going to lose their fucking mind.
Hey, I want to say something about that, because this is one of the things, Schrodinger, that it's coming out in my new video, because the lady that's in my next Karen video, she makes the claim of, I'll wear masks when they start telling people that they can't smoke cigarettes anymore. And I'm like, well, hold on.
They can't.
Thank you for bringing that point up, right? Because what have they done? You can no longer smoke in a restaurant. Why? Because that affects the people around you. So they have outlawed that in most states and counties. And I don't know if it's a federal law or not, but in most states and most counties, most cities, they no longer allow you to sit next to a person while you smoke a cigarette and they enjoy their dinner. Now, why is that?
Because for that.
Exactly.
But thanks Schrodinger's Cat when you make your video.
But again, this is what the government does. When the government recognizes something to be a problem, they go in and they make regulations that keep that problem from causing, you know, mass health issues across the community or social issues.
And people adapt to it, and that becomes the new normal. And it's not this massive change. You know, people don't even think about it unless we were like, you know, we're all sitting here thinking like, what's different than it was a few years ago? You don't really think about it, you know, as a big change until you think back that, holy crap, you know, you used to go on an airline and they had ashtrays in the armrests of the airplane.
Most airlines, if they haven't updated their seats, a lot of seats still have those ashtrays, and they're either welded shut or they're just not, and they're filled up with bubble gum wrappers or some shit, you know?
But people would lose their absolute mind if you were to light up a cigarette on the airline, you know? So, yeah, what is normal changes. It evolves as society does. And so when we come out of this COVID thing, of course it's going to be a little bit different than it is now. You know, when you walk into Walmart, they have the little hand sanitizer thing that everybody walks by and uses. That was never there before, but I bet it's going to be there from now on.
Even if it was there, people would not fucking use it. They'll walk right by it because it was just not something that triggered them, like registered in their head that, oh yeah, my hands could be dirty and I could be spreading around a pathogen or anything,
Right.
bacteria, it could be anything.
Right. And now, go ahead, Jack. You said you wanted to say something.
Yeah, I just sent something again. If you want to look at it, it's what I'm going to be talking about here. And it's going to be my final comment on this whole coronavirus thing. But as someone who was born in the Far East, like I was born on Taiwan, and I emigrated to Canada, the way that Westerners look at how Asian countries are dealing with the coronavirus, it's just so bewildering to me. Because like the thing I just linked in the group chat was a conservative Canadian think tank talking about how several Asian countries like Taiwan and Japan, Korea, they didn't lock down, but they were just fine. And that's very surprising to me because as far as I'm concerned, we locked down a lot better than Western countries did. So what they are referencing is that most businesses are still open and schools are still open. You know, universities are still open. You can go on campus, but they leave out a huge chunk of the information. So first of all, every single person coming into our airports, they're immediately screened for their temperature. If their temperature is above a certain threshold, they get deported back to wherever the hell they came from. Even if you don't trigger that line of defense, so to speak, you have to quarantine yourself for 14 days, no matter where you're from. Even if you're a Taiwanese citizen, you have to quarantine yourself for 14 days after you arrive. And if you can't afford, say, to buy 14 days worth of food, the government provides it for you. They will literally ship it to your home, and they'll even call you every single day to make sure that you're still quarantining yourself within your home. When you go to a shopping mall, they take your temperature, you have to wear a face mask, you have to sanitize your hands, you do all these precautions. When a school finds one of their students to have the coronavirus, every single student is forced to quarantine for 14 days, the school is shut down, and every single student is eventually tested. And there's one last big precaution that I just can't remember off the top of my head. What was it? God damn it. But the idea is that even though businesses are still open, it's not as if Asian countries, they're not taking precautions, because Taiwan is basically the same in terms of our precaution strategy as every single other neighboring Asian state. Japan, South Korea, China, Singapore, all of them. We all take precautions, but it just looks open when you just cherry pick certain aspects and compare them to Western countries. So it absolutely drives me insane when people are using my homeland as an example of why we should stay open. Like, no, we don't stay open. We close down hard. We do it better than you guys do, but as far as I'm concerned. But that's no excuse to like cherry pick certain aspects and use it as arguments for ignorance. It just drives me insane.
Yeah, I remember back in December, I was in. That was when I was in Hawaii the first time back in December, way before COVID. And there's just tons of Japanese people come to Hawaii right around Christmas, New Year's time. And they wear masks just as a matter of course, way before COVID. Masks are just something that they culturally wear.
Yeah.
So
the thing I forgot was contact tracing. The reason why of the 400 cases that have occurred on Taiwan, only 50 have been what we call domestic cases, and everyone else is just someone who was sick overseas and brought it over, is because of the fact that we can contact trace. When we find out who is sick, every single person who we know has been in close contact with them in the past 2 weeks is immediately forced to quarantine and do testing. And that's because we do things like monitor with CCTV cams, and it might be a little invasive to Western eyes, but that's how we're able to keep track of these things.
Right. It doesn't surprise me that those Far Eastern countries have fared better than many of the others.
Yeah, my friends.
Look at South Korea. Look at South Korea. South Korea, where the United States is experiencing an influx of about 6 to 7% unemployment rate versus our last year. This would be July 2019 to July 2020. A place like South Korea that took the virus seriously and takes things like contact tracing seriously, self-quarantine seriously. In those countries, you don't see the virus getting out into the public. Even when one person gets infected, there's such a, not just a communal response to it, but there's also like a self-responsibility response that goes on over there. And it's not just the government that took it seriously. It was the entire population of South Korea took it seriously. That 50 million people that have barely more than 300 loss of life of citizens in a country of 50 million people. We have only 6.6 times, I think, their population, and we have over 190,000 deaths. America failed this one. We should have paid attention more to the countries that were succeeding, especially the countries in the Far East that, like I said, took it seriously from day one.
Yeah, like my friends and I, we joke that we learned our lesson from SARS. The U.S. won't learn its lesson from Corona.
Yeah, no, this has been a more divisive thing in our country than even the racial tensions, in my opinion.
Yeah, I know. Like,
yeah, because we got the deniers and everything. You know, just to...
Sorry, I cut you off there.
No, I was just saying it's such an issue in the U.S. that we've got, no matter what it is, everything is politicized. So if you're on one side of the aisle, you say either COVID's fake or the masks don't work or, you know, the restrictions are too harsh or, you know, every aspect of the virus has to be politicized. You know, on the extreme side, you say just COVID is fake, or, you know, if you're a little bit, you know, back that off a little and you just say, okay, masks don't work, or it's just every aspect of it has to be politicized. We can never just all come together.
Well, the next video I'm covering has a lady who's created the Freedom to Breathe Agency. Okay. Right.
Oh, I saw that woman. She puts it forth like it's some kind of official government agency when she approaches people. I mean, it's not, and anybody who has a brain and isn't like completely naive, but that's the problem. She's approaching these minimum wage workers who are usually teenagers, but now they're employed because they're actually considered essential workers, like in fast food restaurants and stuff, because that's how a lot of people are getting food, is through Uber Eats. So they're approaching people like that, saying, oh, you have to let us in without a mask because blah, 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 free agents.
Yeah, Freedom to Breathe Agency. That's fucking nuts.
Yeah, that's a good way to go.
But it's just like what you're saying, Schrodinger. I mean, why even call it the freedom? It's the anti-mask task force, the Freedom to Breathe Agency. It's because that's their way of politicizing the fact that they don't like wearing masks and they're against wearing masks. Why not just be against it? Why the need for an agency and for this, you know, political approach to the problem versus just a more pragmatic approach and say, you know, we started a Facebook group and we're anti-mask or against the mask.
It's bewildering to me.
Yeah, I'm at a loss on that one. Just that's going to be a good video. I got to watch that one.
Oh yeah, no, because I actually, okay, so a patron suggested the channel to me, and then when I went to the channel, like one of the very first videos I found was the Freedom to Breathe video, and I'm like, oh god, okay, let's watch this. And it was horrible, right? It's such a good video to debunk because she's such an idiot. And then on Reddit, I found a video of her doing exactly what Bullionator was talking about, where she was approaching like a Starbucks employee. Now, I believe it was Starbucks. The Starbucks employee was extremely polite to her and just completely ignored anything they were saying. They were trying to hold sheets up of paper and read from the sheets of paper, and it was all this freedom to breathe shit. I mean, there's nothing about a mask that prevents you from breathing. Why do you label it as a freedom to breathe? Just breathe.
That sounds a lot like the video that I had about a week or so ago, where the guy went and he did a First Amendment audit of a women's shelter. An abused women's shelter. What the actual fuck?
Why would you do that? Why would you do that?
Why would you do that? That was my question in the video.
You know, some people just deserve to get their ass kicked. I'm sorry.
He should have been curb stomped, yes.
Go ahead, Jack.
So what did he do an audit on? I'm a little confused on that one.
So do you know what First Amendment auditors are?
No idea. I'm not American. I'm Canadian and Taiwanese.
Oh, okay. Well, no, there's a few of them that are in Canada. So
Oh, no.
You don't see
they
any of
just
these people in China or Taiwan, bro.
oh no,
The
you would
government
never
wouldn't let this shit happen.
no, that would never
Yeah,
happen.
China, yeah, Taiwan not so much, but yeah.
They're very prevalent in the UK. So they go around to public places and in a very creepy way they just start filming people. They love to go to post offices, libraries, city buildings, courthouses, and they just start walking around filming, and they wait for somebody to make contact with them. And sometimes they just won't speak at all, or they say, well, I have a right to film in public, or they just do it in a very provocative way to try to get a response from the police.
Yeah.
And so that's how they make their YouTube videos. They try to get the police to come, and they say, well, I have a right to film, this is my rights, and all this other stuff. Well, this particular idiot decided he was going to pull that crap at a women's shelter.
Oh.
And so, yeah, in the U.S., I'm sure in Canada and everywhere else too, if you're a victim of domestic violence, you can go to one of these shelters.
Yeah.
And your anonymity is protected because a lot of times these women will have, their male counterpart who's looking for them.
Yeah.
So the last thing in the world that you want is somebody going there, filming you there, putting it on YouTube, so that this dude can be like, oh, that's where Nancy's at,
Yeah.
So
yeah,
when it comes to like the First Amendment auditors, there's proper ways of doing it and there's improper ways. It's just like, debunking flat Earth. There's, you'll get people that know that the Earth's not flat, but what they say is completely wrong. So there's people who say, I want to ensure that the First Amendment of the United States is being upheld. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with making sure you do that. But then there's people that say that, oh, I'm going to do this, but they do it illegally, or they don't. At that point, they're not really doing it. And one of the things about the First Amendment and most of the amendments on the, in the Constitution is that they apply until they violate another constitutionally guaranteed amendment.
Right.
And so then you have there's an amendment, I believe it's the 10th Amendment. It's either the 10th or the 14th Amendment is what gives the states the rights to generate laws. The 10th Amendment, okay. The 10th Amendment gives the states the rights to generate laws about any right that's not exclusively covered by the Constitution. For instance, you have no constitutional right to own your own land, to keep me from going onto your land. Like I want my constitutional right to film wherever I want, right? So you own your own land. Well, what keeps me from going onto your land and filming from your window, on your private land? Well, there shouldn't be anything. There's nothing constitutionally guaranteed about that. And there is for the government, but citizen to citizen, there's nothing that's constitutionally guaranteed about that. That's something that's then written through like your state's constitution or your local laws that are established by your county. Now they can, and that's protected by the 10th Amendment. So it is protected by certain amendments, just like you can't go into a police station while someone's filling out a police report and go try to film them filming the police report. Going into a police station and filming is not explicit. It's explicitly covered by the First Amendment. You can do that. But the moment that you try to violate somebody else's rights that might be covered by the 10th Amendment, then your First Amendment no longer applies. And that's where they don't understand that. And a lot of states set up laws like exclusion zones to where the First Amendment can be used, and these exclusion zones are specifically set up for victims, to keep victims from being exposed as victims, to give them the right to privacy when reporting their crimes, because that's one of the biggest things for women and people of like we'll stick with women because it's talking about a woman's shelter. When they're a victim of something, a lot of the what keeps them from reporting the crimes is the presence of their attackers, the presence of the aggressor, and the fear that the aggressor might retaliate because of that. And knowing where they're at, knowing the location of them, can significantly encourage the aggressor to go out and silence his person, or continue the violence and abuse that was going on to begin with. And that's why they get protection against that. And your First Amendment can then be suspended in those situations.
And there's other places they like to do it too. Like they like to do it at courthouses a lot. Like, well, there's a lot of court cases that are not public. They're just not. It has most civil cases. There's stuff that's on public record, but the actual proceedings in chambers are not public, and you're never going to be able to take a camera into a judge's chambers. It's just not happening.
Yeah.
So, and then
also
there's
family court.
Right.
You know.
Family court where there's kids. Minors are protected explicitly. In most states, they're protected explicitly. You are not allowed to film minors in a courthouse. It's just not happening.
Here's a good example, right? Okay, so let's go to the most public of public places, the beach, right? I take my camera onto the beach, and people are like, "No, don't film me, don't film me, don't film me." Well, you're on a beach. I'm sorry, you're fucking getting filmed. All right, I want to film. It's my First Amendment right to film. Now, let's say I want to go film in the women's bathroom. Okay. Now, hey, First Amendment covers that, does it not? Does the First Amendment explicitly say that I have the right to document any place in public?
As a matter of freedom of speech, yes, it does.
Yes, it does. But we as intelligent people can already see the problem with that, right? I mean, we should not allow people to take cameras into bathrooms. Right. So there's a stipulation to that. There's now the stipulation that, yes, you have freedom to record your First Amendment. You have a First Amendment right, but your First Amendment right extends to certain areas where privacy is not expected. A bathroom is where privacy would be expected. Your bedroom is where privacy would be expected. For someone to film outside of your house and say, "Hey, I'm on a public sidewalk," but for them to turn their camera on from the public sidewalk and try to film inside of your house while you're getting undressed in your bedroom is not protected by the First Amendment. You cannot.
Right. And I've used these arguments in my videos when I'm talking about that. Like, I've used the example. Okay, well, a kindergarten class is a public space. It's owned by the public, but you can't go in there and film the kindergartners. You know, you can't do that. And in the case of the women's shelter, what the sheriff's department said was, because he said, "Oh, I'm just standing on the public sidewalk filming through the windows." And the sheriff's department sergeant comes along and says, "Hey, guess what? We have peeping Tom laws."
Yeah, that's exactly right. If he said, I'm just filming the building, that's one thing. When he said, "I'm filming through the windows," then he's invading a protected space. Something that society deems as protected.
Yeah, he was explicit. He was obviously filming through the windows. You can see it in the video, and so that's what they didn't arrest him, and I was so disappointed they didn't. They ran him off, but they didn't arrest him.
Sparky didn't make an appearance. That sucks.
No, Sparky the taser did not. I wish he had. But they basically said, "You can leave, or we're going to take you to jail." And he left and claimed victory. I think they had every right to arrest him at that point. He had already done it. You know, he had argued with them about it. I think they should have took him to jail. But we've been going 4 hours. What are you guys thinking?
Maybe we can continue this some other time because it is getting a little late.
I only came on to say hi.
Yeah, at this point we could go all night, but yeah, it's been 4 hours. I guess let's go around and, as Red's Rhetoric would say what you got to say. Jack, you want to say what you got to say first?
I had fun talking about science and then going completely off topic. It was nice of you guys to invite me on, even though I kind of fucked you all over the first time around.
No worries.
Sorry about that. I'm looking forward to coming on again. Hopefully you guys will be there when I do the the 5G debate, and I'll be looking to do something with Tony on climate change. But yeah, that's that.
Sounds good. Yeah, and you're going to be on what, MC Tune's channel for that?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't miss anything that Tune does, so I'll definitely be watching that. Tony, good sir.
Can I ask before we get to Tony, Jack? Can I ask
ahead.
you a question? I think you were the person that was on when I submitted a question to MC Tune about proving that the sum of all integers does not equal negative 1/12. Was that you that answered that question? Okay, good answer.
All right, thanks.
Tony, thank you for being here. We appreciate it. You're welcome back on my channel anytime. Closing thoughts.
Well, always wonderful to meet with some intelligent people and get some discussion and also some instruction from the chat. Particularly Clive Wells and Phil Bell out there, but always great to see Martianista, Magda, and Jessica G making the chat fun. And thank you, team, for coming on and sort of leavening the technical detail that Jack and I were sort of getting immersed in. Always very grateful for the opportunity to hang out with you guys. So thank you once again.
Absolutely. Welcome anytime. Team Skeptic, my old friend. What do you got to say?
Like I said, I just came on to say hi. I don't know why I fucking stuck around for so long.
2 hours
but
later.
It's okay.
2 hours later, this guy is still here talking.
2 hours later, and my son still hasn't eaten food. But it was a pleasure, man. I always have a good time coming on. And Jack, we need to get you on to debate a flat earther on my channel too one day, man.
I got you, bro. Like, but as nice as I can say is, I am fucking burnt out from flat Earth. I can only expend so many brain cells in the middle of a school semester.
Well, maybe I'll set up an anti-masker or a 5G guy for you.
An anti-masker would be lovely for me because I need that change of pace.
I might have one.
Yeah, I would definitely watch that.
I would watch that.
People like the anti-mask stuff, guys. I'm telling you, it's such a, from a science point of view, it's so cut and dry that there is no argument against it. And we're all like, even my audience is scientifically inclined. So anytime I have a discussion of that type or a video like that, it's always going to be more popular than just some random discussion of nonsense like flat Earth.
Yeah. Oh, Tony, I do need to give you some. Earlier I said that air doesn't behave as a fluid. I think I had a stroke because I just looked through my notes on my tablet, and you're right. So good on you for calling me out on that one. I don't know what I was on there.
No, it's okay. It sort of, again, I come I actually, God, I have this terrible habit of starting a sentence and then going, no, I don't want to start there. Starting again and then going, I don't want to start there. So it takes me 3 or 4 efforts to even get my sentence underway. But, so my field, sea level change isn't directly related to climate change. Sea level is a consequence of climate change, but it's not part of the process. And I kind of thought, well, I don't need to study climate physics. It's irrelevant. 20 years later, this debate still hadn't settled down. And I thought, well, screw this. I'm going to have to study it and work out which one of these is right and which one of these is wrong. And no surprise, it turns out that the climate scientists are right. I really did immerse myself in atmospheric dynamics and what's going on there for a good long while. So it became instinctive for me. And as you say, you're acquiring a familiarity with 20 or 30 branches of physics all at the same time?
Yeah, it's a little heavy.
Yeah, it can get a bit awkward remembering stuff.
And Tony, I want to say I appreciate your attempt at my intensity of modesty there, but I would disagree with you and say that that climate science is so dynamic that the rising sea level actually does play a role in climate science. So you are just as much it might not be like something that, you study the result of climate of sea level rise because of climate change, but I'm sure somewhere along the roads there's some kind of feedback loop that results from the rising sea level. Maybe an increased ice cap melts, meaning was it less albedo, less light being reflected away. So I mean, I'm sure that in a sense you are still a climate scientist, even though from your perspective, you're only you see yourself as only being a scientist in the field of sea level rise. From my perspective, you're still a climate scientist because it's part of the argument.
And there's validity to that. One of the problems that we're hamstrung by is that we've never had as abrupt or as large a displacement of the system as we're seeing at the moment. So we're actually very uncertain as to what potential feedbacks, as you say, there are a variety of potential forcing mechanisms and feedbacks that can occur, and we're only aware of some of them. So it's a bit more dangerous than we think, I think. Anyway.
I just read from Jessica G that both MC Tune and the Plot Hole are live streaming right now. So let's wrap it up. Team Skeptic, were you done with your
I'm never
goodbye?
done. I'm never done. But I'll limit it
true.
to that.
See you guys.
Okay, Dave, what you got?
Well, this is by far one of the most fun hangouts I've been in a long time. From learning about Schrodinger's cat, trying to learn, because a lot of that stuff is over the head of anyone who listens to it. It's really hard to get a hold of that stuff.
Just realize, Bullionator, there was never one cat. There was always two.
Yes.
Sure. Okay. Talking for hours on end about all the stuff that I got on the internet to look at and say, hey, this is the reality. It's been a good time. I moved back to Colorado Springs in 2014 and had a friend who approached me with the flat earth nonsense, and a long time friend, and they're still friends to this day. I don't talk about flat earth with them. I wanted to be well versed in it, and I feel like I've qualified in that respect at this point. So I mean, I could talk to them about it, but I almost wonder what the point is, because either they've already given it up, which seems likely from what I've seen of them recently, or they're not going to be convinced either way. So I'm right where Jack is. I'm kind of tired of the flat earth, but the sovereign citizen stuff, fascinating. First Amendment auditor stuff, it's hilarious.
Yeah,
it's hilarious. I like watching Sparky take a role in stuff, because
that's my jam right now.
Yep,
that's one thing. One of the things I do encourage people, like I have some of the smaller creators that have come to me and said, what should I do next? My flat earth videos really aren't performing, and I tell them all the time, look at what Schrodinger's cat did. He did flat earth, and then he moved on from flat earth to another topic. And one of the topics that people find fascination in is First Amendment auditors and sovereign citizens. Those people are just stupid, and God bless the cops and their tasers.
I passed 22,000 today.
That's fucking awesome.
Oh, nice.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm passing 35,000 today.
Oh.
Yeah,
I'm
at 30. I'm at 34,990. 10 of you out there who aren't subscribed to me right now, head over to Team Skeptic and go subscribe. It's not a question. It's not a recommendation. It's not a suggestion. It's a goddamn demand.
Okay.
Yeah. I said I passed 22, and you got to upstage me on my own channel. So what a dick.
Oh no! Congratulations on getting to 22, you little fucking. We always have to congratulate the smaller channels. Absolutely.
And all I gotta say to all that is fuck you, Kyle Curtis.
Yeah. Y'all
Y'all
could
would
have
be
been,
over 100K.
Y'all could have been, Jesus, easily.
You know,
easily.
hey, Bullionator, as somebody that I like to talk to and feel comfortable talking about stuff like that, do you really think that the non-sec is going to make its way back now?
Oh,
I hope so.
Now more than ever.
I want it to.
Did you
I
hear
want
the
it to.
latest and greatest? Kyle forged
Yes,
his Discover statements, right? He took Discover statements, loaded them up in probably Adobe Pro, right? Adobe PDF Pro, right? Because that was one of the things on the wish list, as I recall. I remember. I might even have an image of that. He wanted Adobe Creative Suite. Well, apparently he got it, and guess what? That includes Adobe Acrobat. So he edited it. He changed the address, and he forged poor Benjamin Pott's signatures.
Signature, yes, which is a felony.
Yes.
So, yeah, I saw that, and I saw the interview that he had on Red's channel, which is I think is going to go a long way for Steve, and good for Steve. I'm glad. I think
so. The judge gave them a continuance till Wednesday because the hearing was supposed to be Friday until they submitted this evidence, and the lawyer, of course, Kyle's lawyer is probably freaking out. I feel sorry for his lawyer, his actual lawyer.
He's going to quit. Like.
I'm surprised. I'm surprised the lawyer hasn't recused themselves already. I really am.
Right,
but
when your client lies to you, you can quit.
Yep. But at any point, anyway, they're like, "Well, let us get a continuance together." The judge is like, "Fine, you have till 3:00 Monday to get any rebuttal to this shit in. Otherwise, kiss my ass for having a hearing on Wednesday."
Yeah. Okay. Yep. We're all up to date. Yeah, Kyle's fucked. Hopefully, non sequitur comes back bigger than ever. I will welcome them with open arms. Yeah,
it would be great.
All right. Anybody got any last words before we go away? Having heard nothing, I will say good night, folks. Thank you, everybody, for showing up. I hope that you're smarter now than when we began. Good night.
Good night.